Hello, and thank you for choosing this clean, historical Western romance by Emma Ashwood. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support allows us to keep sharing more wonderful stories for free. So grab a cozy spot, kick back, and let this story whisk you away to a different time and place. Enjoy. Copyright Emma Ashwood. The Fairy Tale Bride by Emma Ashwood. Chapter 1. You have a family to take care of. It's time to put aside this childish behavior, Jacob. Enough is enough. The fighting echoed through the townhome and filtered into the ears of a 5-year-old girl who lay huddled under the kitchen table. Bella put her hands over her ears to drown out the sounds. She hated when her Uncle Jacob came to visit. Not only was he usually drunk, his wife was insolent and rude to Bella. Their 2 children, Edward and Matilda, were always crying and throwing tantrums, which somehow usually resulted in Bella getting blamed for things she didn't do. Just because you have it all figured out, you think you can tell me how to live my life. You have more than enough money to share with me and my wife. When did you become so selfish? Jacob shouted at his older brother. David tried to steady his voice. Listen, Jacob, I have given you money time and again only to see you gamble and drink the money away. Your responsibility is to your wife and your children. Until you can prove you are man enough to own that, you will not get another cent from me. So now you are going to force my family onto the streets. Is that it? Jacob's voice shook with anger. David was losing patience with his younger brother. You know good and well, if it came to that, I would do right by your wife and children. But let's remember whose fault it would ultimately be. Jacob couldn't stand the condescending tone of his older brother. Who did he think he was anyway? Everything had always been so easy for David. He was born the oldest and therefore inherited the family's haberdashery business, which was booming in New York. Jacob knew that his brother had more than enough to help him out. What in the world happened to you, brother? You were supposed to take care of me. Remember what father said? No matter what, don't let anything come between you. Well, looks like all it took was a second look from that brunette you decided to take as a wife. This is her doing, isn't it? She is nothing but a selfish woman who sponges off you and your hard work. He saw his blow had hit its mark. Emily was David's pride and joy, next to their daughter Bella. Emily had come into David's life not long after his father's death and brought a light that radiated from her like the rays of the sun. She was anything but lazy. She was a hard-working, beautiful woman, and Jacob's remark made David's blood boil. Furthermore, David knew that when his father told him to take care of his younger brother, he never meant for him to fund his childish behavior. David's eyes blazed with the fury of a man whose love for his wife ran deeper than his calm countenance could reach. Leave Emily out of this, Jacob seethed inside. Don't tell me what to do. I am sick and tired of it. Your wife is a leech and not worth the boat she came in on. That was the last straw. David lunged at Jacob, knocking over a chair as he did so. Bella sat under the kitchen table, still covering her ears. The sound from the other room was getting louder, and Bella began to cry for her mother. Her cries went unheard as the brothers continued to fight. Through her tears, she began to sing a song her mother sang to her every night before bed. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. As she sang, she saw something flicker. The oil lamp crashed to the floor. Suddenly, the yelling stopped. She crawled out from under the table, still singing, Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. Bella felt the heat. What happened next was a symphony of confusion. Her father screamed her name and searched her out in the kitchen. He scooped her up and ran out the door, the heat scorching her eyes as they passed. Everything felt so hot. Once they were safely outside, her father looked around, concern in his eyes. Where is your mother? Bella stared at her father. Bella, where is she? She pointed at the house. David looked at the house, then back at Bella. You stay here, do you hear me? Don't move. He sprinted into the house. That was the last time she ever saw him. Bella turned her head just in time to see her uncle running for the road, silhouetted against a fire blazing in the middle of New York. We cannot take her in. I will not allow it. Jacob's wife stomped her foot upon the planked floor. Sarah, you have to be reasonable. We can't just send her to an orphanage. Well, why not? Isn't that where orphans are supposed to go? We have our own darlings to think of. Edward and Matilda are only babies. Edward is 2 and Matilda is 4, dear. They are hardly babies. They are my babies, and I will not have some spoiled rich girl come into our home and corrupt our children. Goodness knows how idle she must be, having been pampered her entire life. I won't have it, Jacob. I won't. She stomped her foot again like the spoiled brat she was. Jacob lost his temper. Sarah, enough. It's my fault that house burned down. It's my fault her parents are dead. I am not much for penance, but I will not send her away to be raised by an institution. The least I can do is provide a roof over her head. He lowered his voice. Besides, she will no doubt inherit a small fortune. No doubt someone will be needed to manage that fortune for her. He raised his eyes and made sure his wife understood whom he was suggesting in that role before he continued. We have to be careful, of course. As of now, she doesn't seem to remember the details of that night, and I would like to keep it that way. What would happen if she were in the care of someone else when she suddenly remembered I was there the night of the fire? Where would you and the children be then? Sarah relented. She knew he was right. Fine, but mark my words. She will never be part of this family, ever. Jacob consented and went to make the necessary arrangements. Bella rose to the tinkling of a bell. She rolled over and saw that the sun was barely peeking over the horizon. Earlier every day, I think, she groaned. Coming, she shouted. She rolled out of bed and into the kitchen to build a fire and make tea for her aunt and cousins. They took their tea and breakfasts in bed and rarely emerged from their rooms before the sun was high in the sky. Then they idled their day away, doing nothing productive. The rickety piano sat unused. The embroidery hoops were in a dusty drawer. Edward muddled about outside and played at work, but never actually did any. Bella thought about her life here as she worked. How much different would it be for her if her parents were still alive? She had vague memories of her mother singing to her, and she hummed the song now as she worked. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. She saw the sun finally pull itself out of its slumber and stand proud behind the trees. She watched it for a moment, always thankful for this time in the mornings. While her work was hard, doing it in silence in the early morning hours was a sort of comfort to her. The sun always spoke of new beginnings and gave her hope for her future. The bell rang again. Coming, Aunt. She rushed about, getting the tea and toast ready. She entered her aunt's room and set the tray of offerings by her bed. Aunt Sarah had aged over the past years, and it never showed more than in the morning before she pulled herself out of her bed. What took you so long? I swear if you spent more time working and less time daydreaming, we would all be better off. Yes, Aunt, was her reply. Bella learned to never talk back or contradict her aunt, or her cousins for that matter. It is prosody per cent. It was better to do what they said and keep her opinions and ideas between her and the sunrise. Bella opened the drapes to let in the sunshine. Will you look at this dust? Goodness, Bella, have you even touched this room in days? No, Aunt. Last week you told me to stay away from your room and never to enter it again. Well, you should know that by now I would be needing a clean room. I expect this room to be spotless by the end of the day. Do you understand? Yes, Aunt. Sarah had flown into one of her rages last week and demanded that Bella leave her room and never return. Bella had acquiesced, even though she knew it wouldn't last. Her Aunt Sarah was unpredictable, and any time she was told to stay away, Bella was glad to do so. The bell rang again. Coming, cousin. She ran to fetch Matilda and Edward their tea. Edward was kinder than Matilda, but neither were especially so to Bella. Neither Edward nor Matilda ever had to work for anything in their lives, and it showed. Upon arriving in Matilda's room, Bella steeled herself for the insults she knew were imminent. She always had to mentally prepare herself for entering Matilda's room. While her aunt made demands that were impossible, Matilda piled insults on top of demands, a tower of impropriety designed to hurt Bella in as many ways as possible. Goodness, you look like you haven't slept in weeks. What is with that dress? Can't you buy yourself something respectable? Matilda glared at Bella, jealous of her natural beauty. While Bella was lovely upon waking, Matilda worked for hours, never to come close to Bella's beauty. They say your inner self shines through, and this was never truer than with Matilda. She wore her sour heart on her sleeve, and never did she turn a kind eye upon anyone. Bella went to Edward's room next, to find him still asleep. He didn't mind his tea cold, as he was pretty complacent about most things. Bella always thought he was the only one in this family who stood a chance of becoming anything. Unfortunately, he had no one to show him how to be a man. He was fast turning into his father, and nothing could be done about it. She opened his curtains and set his tea upon his tray, but he never stirred. She looked at him snoring in his bed, shook her head, and left the room. She started in the kitchen again, getting the bread set to rise. In the 14 years she had lived here, she had never heard a thank you or even a kind word. She was a servant in every sense of the word, and a niece and cousin only by blood. She was 19 years old now, the time in a woman's life where her thoughts ought to turn to starting her own family. But here she was, running someone else's household. She had one solitary comfort in this house, and that was her poetry. No one could take that from her. No one could ring a bell and make it go away. She could compose poetry while she worked late into the night, and no one would be the wiser. Today, as she worked the bread, she recited a poem from earlier in the week. The bread will rise, and so will I, into the clouds I go, on eagles. Wings the tale I sing will cover the land with woe. The sun will rise, and so will I, no more tales to tell, for I will rise on the wings of hope, into the clouds go I. She kneaded the bread and smiled out the window, her eyes seemingly far away, floating away from this dreadful place. "Jacob, get in here." Jacob walked into the drawing room. "What is it now, Sarah?" he asked wearily. "Where is the money I kept in my sewing box?" Jacob rolled his eyes. If there was one thing his wife didn't do, it was sew. He didn't even know she had a sewing box. "I didn't take your money, Sarah." "Well, who did? Why don't you ask that precious daughter of ours?" While Jacob gambled away money and drank himself into a stupor most nights, he was a realist. He knew his daughter was not above taking money if she wanted it. Bella stood over the stove in the kitchen and smiled. For once, Jacob was right. Bella had walked in on Matilda just last week and wondered at her holding a sewing box in her hand. Like her mother, Matilda definitely did not sew. "You know Matilda wouldn't do that. It must have been Bella." Bella left out the back door to collect wood for the stove. She wasn't about to be around when Sarah went into one of her tirades. She was thankful that, thus far, her aunt had not yet struck her. But she also made it a point to make herself scarce whenever Sarah was angry. "What have you done with all of the money Bella was supposed to inherit from her parents?" Jacob turned red in the face, knowing that it was all but gone. "That is none of your business. I'm the guardian." "What do you mean it's not my business? Here I am, hiding away money in a sewing box, and you are gambling away all that we have. To make matters worse, my niece is stealing my money right from under our noses." She dropped her voice. "Something has to be done about this, Jacob. We cannot continue to afford to support her. I never wanted her in this house in the first place, and now she is nothing but a burden. It was one thing when we had money coming in, but now—" Jacob heard the back door close and motioned for his wife to be quiet. As of now, Bella had no idea she had ever had an inheritance, and he intended to keep it that way. Chapter 2. Bella set the table for dinner, hoping her aunt would not deem it necessary to confront her about the money. She knew she would never be believed. There was a chance, however, that her aunt knew full well where the money went. Sarah was many things, but oblivious wasn't really among them. Nothing went on in that home without her noticing, and making known her opinion about it. Sarah and the cousins sat down to dinner, completely ignoring Bella, much to her relief. She preferred the hours she was invisible to the ones where she wasn't. Invisibility can be a sort of cloak to the most vulnerable among us. It keeps their souls from icing over. She filled drinks and plates, working as quietly as she could. Her cousin Matilda broke the silence. "Mother, the Carlsons are throwing their party this weekend and I've nothing to wear. I think I'll go to Harper's tomorrow and look for a new dress." "I'm sorry, darling. You'll have to make do with whatever you already have." Her mother motioned for Bella to fill her drink. Matilda stopped eating, holding her fork midway between her plate and her mouth. You can't be serious? I am afraid I am, sugar. Sarah avoided eye contact with her daughter and kept eating. Edward smiled at his sister and kept shoveling food into his mouth. Between bites, he teased her. You couldn't possibly wear the same dress twice to the Carlsons and party. Surely that would be societal suicide. Matilda threw a pea at him. You don't know what it's like being a young woman. If I am ever to marry and get out of this house, I cannot be seen out and about in last year's dress. It would be unthinkable. He moved his mouth and mocked her. Matilda punched him in the arm and pleaded with her mother. Make him stop. He doesn't understand. Sarah scolded Edward. Leave your sister alone. Her complaint is well-founded. She turned to Matilda and tried to comfort her. Let me talk to your father, and we'll see what we can do. Sarah muttered under her breath, and Bella left the room before her aunt could take her frustration out on her. Jacob had left soon after the sewing box incident, leaving his wife to her ramblings. He was really in a bad place, trying to make back the money he lost by gambling even more. Considering it was the cause of the losses in the first place, it can be assumed that he was not at all successful with gambling. He always lost more than he won and drank away whatever was left. He entered the Blue Tavern and headed toward the counter to order a drink. Well, if it isn't Jacob Brown! Jacob turned to see Charles Young smiling at him through stained teeth. I thought you'd never show your face here again. You come back for more, did ya? Charles took another shot of whiskey. Jacob's eyes narrowed. Well, if you were an honest man, I wouldn't have lost my money last time. You know you didn't win that hand of cards fair and square. Charles lit a cigarette and looked him square in the eyes. The men at the nearby tables fell silent in quiet anticipation of an altercation. Two men fighting over a game of cards was hardly rare, but it was interesting all the same. The owner of the bar stared at them from behind the counter, ready to intervene. He had seen more than enough fights for the month, and he didn't want another on his hands. Handling drunken, prideful men was not the most desirable part of his job. Charles stood up slowly, the eyes of all in the bar trained on them. Jacob stepped toward Charles and stopped. They stared at each other for a full minute, the entire bar holding its breath. Men nearby stood up, ready to jump in for the sheer fun of it. Charles looked Jacob up and down and then began laughing heartily. He slapped Jacob on the back. Prosody, Jacob followed suit, laughing and hugging his old friend. Charles, you rascal, when did you get to town? The men laughed robustly while the owner of the bar went back to wiping the counter, breathing a sigh of relief. The rest of the men in the bar looked back at their card game or whiskey, disappointed at the anticlimactic antics of the two old friends. Just came in on the train this morning. How's the old lady? Charles motioned for Jacob to sit down across from him and ordered a couple more drinks. Jacob shook his head. Annoying as ever. You were right. The bachelor life is the way to go. Seems I can't make enough money to suit her or the children. You still have that brat daughter of your brother's? Charles asked. Don't remind me. Every day she's more and more of a burden, one more mouth to feed and body to clothe. Beats me why I ever thought of taking her in. He shook his head. Charles drank his whiskey and leaned back in his chair. You're just too nice, that's all. Anyone else would have sent her off. What is she now? 18? 19, Jacob answered, taking a swig of his whiskey. 19 then, plenty old enough to be off on her own. I guess so. That still doesn't help my money troubles, though. Sarah has been on me about it, but I don't know what to do. Jacob shook his head and lit a cigarette. Excuse me, gentlemen. A tall, bearded man in his 20s stood by their table with a shorter man in an overcoat beside him. They both tipped their hats to Charles and Jacob. The bearded man spoke. My name is James, and this here is my brother Paul. We couldn't help overhearing your conversation. We don't mean to intrude, but if we could have a few minutes of your time, I think we could be of service to you. Only minutes later, all four men were sitting at a table with a round of drinks courtesy of James. Forgive my forwardness, but I like to get right to the point. James looked pointedly at Jacob. It seems to me you have two problems. An extra girl and not enough money. Am I right? Jacob took a drink and looked at him. Yeah, sounds about right. James leaned forward. Well, have you heard of women moving out west to become brides? Charles spoke up. I have. I just came from that direction. On my way out there, I met two such women. They were all up in a tizzy about meeting their new husbands. The men just up and order them, don't they? Sort of, James responded, lighting a cigarette. He held one out to Jacob, who shook his head. It's like this. A man out west places an advertisement in a newspaper called the Matrimonial Times, saying he's looking for a wife. The girl responds to the ad and they exchange letters. I'm not sure how this solves my issues. Jacob smoked and looked at his new friend with curiosity. That's just it. It turns out, well, my brother and I here have found it, that some men will pay good money for the right bride. Is this girl of yours a pretty one? That she is, remarked Jacob, and handy around the house, too. She can cook a good meal, clean better than my wife ever could. He trailed off, rubbing his chin. How much money are we talking? James named an amount that caused Jacob's eyebrows to shoot up. You can't mean that. James leaned back in his chair. But I do, don't I, Paul? Paul just smiled and nodded his head. What's in it for you? Jacob asked. Well, we would take a cut, of course. 30%. 30%? Jacob looked angry. Paul spoke up. Listen, Mr. Brown, that's still more than enough to get rid of a problem you don't want. And we handle everything. My brother here is a pro at organized marriages, and I'm no slack myself. You can figure out this whole thing on your own or work with us. The choice is yours. He leaned back in his chair and looked at Jacob. Jacob looked at Charles, who turned to James. I assume you can orchestrate the whole thing without Bella knowing? Sure can, James said. And since she's still in your friend's care, she can't really argue. I imagine she could put up a fuss, but no one would listen. The county has bigger fish to fry these days. Charles shrugged. Seems like a fair deal to me, and I've seen a lot of deals in my day. He watched Jacob's face. Jacob rubbed his chin before a smile began to spread across his weathered face. Fellas, I think I'm in agreement. Let's get rid of this niece of mine and make some money to boot. They shook hands and drank on it. Then they drank some more. Eventually, Jacob returned home in the early hours, stumbling and mumbling about brides and money and trains. He awoke to water being poured over his face. Get up, you lazy drunk. Sarah was standing over him, piping mad. How did you find money to spend on drinking all night? She stared at him as though he had three heads. Hold on there, Sarah. I didn't buy a single drink, I swear. Jacob held his arms up to shield his face as she dumped more water on him. A liar you are, and a poor one at that. Her eyes snapped as she dumped the last of the water on his face. Listen, Sarah, I have news. If you would calm down and stop dumping water on me for a second, I can tell you. Well, before you start in on your news, I have something to tell you. Matilda is supposed to go to a party this weekend at the Carlsons' house, and she will need something new to wear. You already know my money is gone, stolen by that good-for-nothing niece of yours, I'm sure. My poor Matilda will have to go in a made-over dress if we don't do something about it. She's coming of age soon, and if we expect her to have any respectable prospects, we cannot send her to this gathering in an old dress. It is unthinkable. I quite agree, dear. And another thing. Wait, what did you say? Sarah looked at him curiously. She had expected to have to fight her husband on this, and never dreamed he would agree with her so quickly. I said, I quite agree. Jacob smiled at her crookedly, having not quite slept off the effects from the night before. Sarah was suspicious, not quite understanding what this was all about. Get yourself cleaned up, she said, and let's talk. About 30 minutes later, they were sitting in the living room drinking strong tea. Jacob told her about meeting the two men and their proposition, and how he had agreed to sell Bella out west to a rancher or farmer looking for a bride. Well, how about that? Sarah sat back in her chair and drank her tea, staring off into the distance. You're sure this is for real? They aren't con men who are going to take our money and disappear on the midnight train? Sarah asked. No, ma'am. They are giving us money, remember? They gave me an advance on it as well, just to prove they were serious. Matilda can use some of it to buy that dress she needs, and the rest you can pack away in your sewing box, or in whatever useless box you might own. We will get the balance of it when it's all finished. They are working at finding someone for her as we speak. He drank his tea and looked at her over his cup, seeing in his wife's eyes what he hadn't seen in years: respect. He was going to get rid of the proverbial thorn in her side and get paid for doing so. In that moment, Sarah had never loved him more. Chapter 3. Joshua Miller sat on the front porch on his ranch in Montana, staring out over the landscape. The sun was sinking into the horizon, and he felt that his life was slipping away just as quickly. Since the death of his parents 5 years ago, 25-year-old Joshua had been working night and day to build his cattle ranch. While it had become very profitable, he still felt that something was missing. He employed several ranch hands, a housemaid, and made more money in a year than his parents ever did. Yet, as he sat there watching the colors of the sun filter through the trees, he realized he needed someone with whom to share all this. He had always wanted a family, but it's hard to find a wife while building a business and living in a remote land populated with more turkeys than women. He had decided to place an ad in the Matrimonial Times for a bride, and had also decided to let her live in a cabin on his property for 3 weeks after she arrived. He couldn't wrap his head around marrying someone he had never met, but figured he would have a better idea of how well they were matched if he could court her for a few weeks. He held the advertisement in his hands and wondered if he was doing the right thing. Is it wrong to marry someone you've never met? Even worse, was it wrong to ask a woman to come all the way to Montana and then decide not to marry her after all? Meredith Collins walked out onto the porch. "Joshua, the kitchen is tidied up and the laundry put away. Can I do anything else for you?" she drawled. She put her hand on his shoulder. He jumped. "No, Meredith. That will be all. Thank you." "My, aren't we jumpy?" Meredith purred. "Anything the matter?" Joshua smiled at her briefly. "No, not at all. I'm just off in my own world, that's all." "Well, don't stay gone too long. I'm afraid I would miss you terribly." She stood on the porch, hoping for conversation. When it didn't seem forthcoming, she sighed inwardly. "Good night, Joshua. I will see you tomorrow morning." "Night, Meredith." Joshua didn't look at her and stared instead at the paper in his hand. "What's got you all in a state?" Hank, a ranch hand, smiled sideways at Meredith as she stomped across the field to her cabin. "Oh, that Joshua Miller. He is infuriating." She stomped her foot. "Not to mention confusing." "Not all men can be unlocked, Meredith. Or if they can, there is only one key. I hate to break it to you, but I don't think you have it. I know what you're up to, Meredith, and I think Joshua Miller is off limits. To you anyway." Meredith glared at him. "What do you know?" She tossed her head. "If I want him, which I'm not saying I do, I'll get him. You can be sure of that." Hank shook his head and threw a rope up and over his shoulder. "Whatever you say, Meredith." He smiled to himself as Meredith huffed and puffed her way to her cabin. Hank was the smartest and most observant hand in Joshua's employ. He had been watching Meredith for months and knew she was dying to sink her claws into Joshua Miller. Hank knew Joshua wasn't interested in Meredith. She was too forward and uninteresting to boot. But Meredith seemed unable or unwilling to internalize his obvious disinterest in the housemaid. He laughed to himself as he hauled the rope and pails to the stable. This could get interesting. Jacob Brown sat at the Blue Tavern across from James Calmud. The bar was mostly empty. It was a Thursday night, and the snow was just starting to fall outside. The New York winters were usually drab and always punctuated with snowstorms. "It's starting to come down heavy now, ain't it?" James lit his customary cigarette. "That it is," answered Jacob. "Good thing Charles got out on the train yesterday. He may have been stuck here." He looked out the window at the snow piling up. "He never stays in one place long, does he?" James inquired. "That he doesn't. He's not one for settling down, that's for sure." Jacob shook his head, smiling, thinking of his old friend. "Well, let's get down to business, shall we?" James ordered 2 drinks and began to lay out his plan for Bella. "My brother couldn't make it today. He's on another job. But I think I found just the man for your Bella. His name is Joshua Miller, and he runs a ranch out in Montana." "Where exactly is that?" Jacob interrupted, furrowing his brow. "Far enough away that you won't have to worry about seeing her again," James laughed. "Read my mind, Mr. Calmud." Jacob drank and nodded at him. "Go on." He seems to be a good fellow, if that eases your conscience at all. Here is his advertisement. He slid a copy of the Matrimonial Times over to Jacob. Joshua Miller, single, never married, of Maple Hill, Montana, is in want of a wife for companionship. Ranch owner, businessman, hard worker, kind. I propose a trial period of 3 weeks during which the bride-to-be will live in her own cottage on my ranch before marrying, barring any glaring character issues. Please inquire at the below address. Jacob nodded his approval. Now what? James frowned and detailed their communication with the advertiser and that they had made the offer to make the necessary arrangements for a nominal fee, to which he had agreed. I should have asked for more. He didn't even hesitate at my number. Anyway, he said he was sending the money and it should be here any day now. James reached into his coat and drew out a folded page. He slid it across the table with a grin. Jacob unfolded it and frowned. The hand was fine and even, a woman's hand, sloped like schoolhouse copperplate. It spoke of a quiet upbringing, of skill with a needle, of a longing for open country. It was signed, "Yours faithfully, Miss Bella Brown." She never wrote this, Jacob said slowly. Of course not. Paul wrote it. My brother has a gift. James tapped the page with a stained finger. Mr. Miller wanted letters, so Mr. Miller got letters. 5 of them now. He is half in love already, if you ask me. Jacob turned the page over in his hands. Somewhere beneath the whiskey, something small and cold shifted in him. He set the letter down and reached for his glass. Clever, was all he said. Does he know we are sending her against her will? Jacob asked. Oh no, he just thinks he is paying us for our help. He has no idea you are being paid. As far as he knows, she is a willing participant in this little scheme. And truth be told, I think she will be soon enough. It's not as if living with an aunt who hates her and an uncle who tolerates her is a joy of any sort. I doubt she will run away from a wealthy rancher once they are wed. Jacob admitted that he made a good point and that he was glad the advertiser was not wise to the true story. He certainly did not need the added frustration of a Western rancher making trouble for him at any stage. The fewer people who knew the details, the better. James confirmed that all seemed to be in order and that the arrangement looked to be completed before the end of the month. Excellent. Jacob leaned back in his chair. Sarah has been asking when this whole thing will be decided. She will be glad I have news for her. Sarah was sitting idle in a red and white candy-striped chair when Jacob sauntered in. Why are you home so early? She asked, looking him up and down. I had some news for you. Plus the storm is rising, and I didn't want to get caught in it. I'll have Bella get us some tea. She rang a bell, and Bella obeyed the order as quickly as she could. Well, what is it? Out with your news. Have you heard anything from the men who are supposedly helping us get rid of that insolent brat we have living here? Yes, as a matter of fact, I have. He handed his wife the advertisement. She read it, a smile stretching across her face, which quickly turned into a frown. What is this? A 3-week trial period? What if he sends her back? Goodness knows I would send her back after 3 weeks. Jacob waved his hand dismissively. Mr. Kalmud said this is customary. No one ever gets sent back. It's just kind of an insurance in case the girl shows up, not as described. He slurped his tea. Well, I hope you are right. Jacob assured her that Mr. Miller was sending the money to the brothers at that very moment and that it was to be finalized within 2 weeks. Sarah let it be known that the entire process was dragging on far longer than she had expected. Jacob could see that the newfound love Sarah found for him when he first announced his plan was long gone. Back was the contentious wife who had been his loyal companion for the last 2 decades. He rolled his eyes and ate his biscuits solemnly. 2 weeks later, Bella was washing dishes when her aunt bustled into the room. Bella, I need to talk to you. Yes, Aunt. Bella turned around, drying her hands. Sarah looked at her standing there with the towel in her hands, dutiful as a doll. Sarah detested her. She had hated her from the moment she met her in her brother-in-law's house. She was always so prim and dutiful and kind. There are those among us who make a habit of hating whatever they admire, but know they can never be. This was the case for Sarah Brown. She felt her blood run hot. I heard word this morning that a transaction has been completed that involves you. Bella looked at her quizzically. her beautiful eyes showing a concern and a softness which fueled Sarah's anger even more. You, my dear, are being sent off west to marry a rancher. You aren't wanted here. You were never wanted here. Sarah all but spat the words at her. You will pack your things and be on the Saturday morning train. Bella dropped the towel in shock. But, Aunt, I don't know this man. Be glad of that, or he would never have you, I'm sure. Sarah left the room, a smile playing on her face at the reaction her announcement had gleaned. There is a joy some people take in the wounding of another's soul. It lasts only a moment, and it scars the one who feels it as surely as the one it strikes. But that moment was a drug to Sarah Brown. For now she was happy, very, very happy. Chapter 4. Bella went to her room and cried. She cried for the life she never had and for the one that was being taken away. She cried for the family she never knew and the one she was heading west to build. She cried until she was sure she had no tears left. Then she fell asleep. She dreamed. She dreamed of a land where sparrows flew low to the ground, biting at the earth. She was a little girl sitting in a field when one circled and landed on her arm. She stared into his beady eyes and laughed, scaring the sparrow away into the blue sky. Suddenly she awoke to the darkness with the moon high and full. She took up the pencil and notepad from under her pillow and moved to her attic window. Her eyes were sad and puffy from hours of crying, and she felt numb inside. She stared out into the night and at the moonlight reflecting off of the snow falling. The picture would be a peaceful one under any circumstances, even those such as these. The moon was bright enough to negate the need to light a candle, and she began to write. Though my tears fall like snow upon the eaves, moonlight warms me as the sun upon the trees. Though my heart aches for reasons undisclosed, still it beats true. As I enter the unknown, may it find me whole and bring me to my knees, for real growth comes through hardships such as these. She stared into the city blanketed by the crystal glow of winter and resolved to grow. Like the moonlight, she would reflect what sun there was and plant new roots in a new place. And like a newly planted flower, she would reach for the sky, refusing to die. Her aunt hadn't killed her spirit. Her cousins had not killed her spirit. Neither would this. Not if she could help it. The driver of the carriage studied Bella as he approached. She stood holding a single suitcase, staring at her little house. Her pale yellow dress hung loosely about her ankles, and she held her suitcase down at her side as if it weighed nothing at all, her brown braid cascading down her back. She looked like the image in a painting. She turned to watch his approach, and the depth of her blue eyes shocked him. This, combined with the fact that she was all alone without a send-off, touched the young coachman. He jumped down from his post nimbly and smiled to try and cheer her up. Shall we be off? He reached for her suitcase and saw that her eyes were filled with tears. He looked at her with concern. Something wrong, miss? She sighed and wiped her eyes. Oh no, just a little worried about change is all. She handed him her suitcase and ascended the carriage steps. He helped her into the carriage and said as she sat down, If you don't mind my saying so, I do believe change is how we grow, miss. He smiled at her kindly and closed the door. Bella looked after him and smiled. So it is, she whispered to herself. She smoothed her dress, sat up straight, and watched the home disappear from her life as abruptly as it had entered it 14 years before. The train station was not very busy at this hour. She held out her ticket and boarded the train with little complication. More than once she thought about just disappearing. But where would she go? How would she live? While proceeding to the rear carriages, she saw a girl about her age wearing a purple dress and hat. The girl made eye contact with Bella and smiled. Mind if I sit next to you? Bella asked nervously. Not at all, the girl answered, and she scooted over to make room. Bella assumed that the train was due to collect more passengers at stops down the line, and she would rather choose her seatmate than have it chosen for her. I'm Polly, the young girl introduced herself. I am headed to Montana to live with family for a while. Oh, that's where I'm headed, exclaimed Bella. My name is Bella, and I'm headed to meet my new husband. Polly turned to Bella excitedly. Did you answer one of those exciting ads? I think it has to be so romantic, don't you? Bella smiled shyly as the train departed. She wasn't sure how much to divulge to her new acquaintance. She sat for a minute, watching the landscape move faster and faster past the window, then turned to her new friend and offered her a careful piece of the truth. Well, I didn't really answer myself, shall we say. I feel like this is all so new and so sudden. Polly didn't pry, but rather encouraged Bella. My cousin, Frances, went out west to marry a farmer in Kansas last winter. She lost her parents to illness and had few options or prospects here. My parents, of course, offered to take her in, but she rather liked the idea of a new life out west. My mother wrote to her sister out in Montana to ask her what she knew about it all. She told my mother that she knew of more than a few ranchers who had brought brides out west. Did they usually seem happy, did she say? Bella asked her nervously. My aunt, while always very quick to speak the absolute truth, said that she only knew of happy endings where this is concerned. I mean, of course, not every marriage can be a fairy tale, but for the most part, the men out west need women to soften their lives, and the women from the east could use a little toughening up. And your cousin? How's she doing? Bella asked. Oh, that's the thing. She is just splendid. She did say life was a little more challenging, but she loves her husband and her life out west. They are expecting their first baby this summer. Bella smiled at Polly. Maybe it really will all work out for the best then. Polly squeezed her arm. Oh, I'm sure it will. I just know it. Bella smiled at her new friend and then turned to look out the window. The city was long gone, and she could almost breathe the new air. Here she was, not an hour into her new life, and she had already made a friend and heard good reports about what was to be her adventure. Bella felt content. The 4 days that followed were a flurry of travel, train stops, meals, talk, and sleep. Bella did open up to Polly about her parents and her aunt and her new life out west that was not exactly her idea. Polly was appalled at what Bella had endured, but continued to encourage her about change being good. Goodness, she said on the 3rd day of travel. How in the world could you be any more scared of what's ahead than what you just left behind? Bella laughed at this and acknowledged the wisdom of this young travel companion. Polly was to get off at the first train stop in Montana, and as they pulled into the stop, Polly pressed a note into Bella's hand bearing her aunt's Montana address and her own address in New York. Please write to me, Bella. I will be at my aunt's for the next few months, and then I will be back in New York. Oh, of course I will, Bella responded. The two girls hugged each other tearfully before Polly alighted onto the platform. Bella watched out the window as Polly was received most joyfully by her aunt and uncle. It made her wistfully aware of all she had never had, yet it bred no jealousy in her heart. Some souls take to envy the way dry grass takes to sparks. Hers had simply never learned how. Polly turned to wave to Bella as the train headed even further west. Bella waved back and then watched the platform fade behind her as one more chapter unfolded in her life. The night before the train was due, Joshua sat at his kitchen table with 5 letters spread before him. He had read them so often the creases had gone soft. By lamplight, he read them again. I am handy with a needle, the second letter said, and I am not afraid of plain work. Plus, the 4th letter promised, I make a fine apple dumpling, though I confess I burn the coffee. That line made him smile every time. A woman who would admit to burning coffee seemed like an honest woman. His favorite was a line from the 3rd letter. I hope Montana has room for a small person with small dreams. He had read that one aloud to the empty kitchen more than once. The letters were neat and friendly and just shy of warm. Each one answered his questions politely, yet not one of them ever asked a question back, and that had worked at him once or twice, the way a pebble works at a boot. Shyness, he had decided. What else could it be? He had swept the little cabin twice and checked that the stove drew properly. Then he had checked it all again, feeling foolish, doing it anyway. Now he gathered the pages and tied them with a length of string. Tomorrow he would meet the woman who wrote them. The thought set his heart knocking like a colt in a new corral. Outside, the wind moved through the dark pastures. A letter can carry a soul across 1,000 miles. It can also carry something else entirely. Joshua Miller went to bed knowing only half of what was riding toward him on the morning train. Chapter 5. Joshua was working in the fields when he noticed the sun in the sky. The train would be arriving in a couple of hours, assuming the thing hadn't been delayed again, and he knew he would not be done with his work in time to meet his potential bride-to-be. Truth be told, he was also nervous and felt better about meeting her at his ranch than in public at some train station. He walked into the kitchen where Meredith was preparing dinner. "Meredith, can you do me a favor?" "Sure, anything," she said, turning around to face him. "I haven't told anyone yet, but I placed an order for one of those brides out east. She'll stay in the unused cabin on the ranch for 3 weeks while we get accustomed to each other and make sure we are compatible enough to be married. Her train will arrive in about an hour and a half. Can you get Hank to drive you into town to meet her?" Meredith stared at him incredulously. After all she had done for him, he ordered a bride. She tried to control her anger. "Sure, Joshua, I'll go talk to him right away." She left before he could see the tears of rage in her eyes. Hank watched Meredith walk with determination across the field in his direction. He smiled at her as she approached. "What's gotcha this time, Meredith? You still haven't dug your claws into the boss?" Meredith glared at him. "Actually, he has placed an ad for a woman to come out here to marry him. She will stay here for 3 weeks while they court." She spat out the last word as if it were laced with sour milk. Hank threw his head back and laughed until his sides ached. "Well, how's that? Here you are, falling all over yourself, and he's ordered himself a bride." He laughed again, shaking his head. Meredith scowled at him. "Oh, it gets worse. You are to drive me into town to meet her at the train station. He's busy," he said, "and wants me to meet her to bring her here." Hank laughed again before moving off to hitch the horses to the wagon. "Meet me out front in about 15 minutes. I'll be glad to take you." "I wouldn't miss this for the world," he chuckled under his breath. Meredith approached Bella on the platform. "Bella Brown, I assume?" The curt question caught Bella off guard, partly because of the tone, and partly because she was not expecting a woman. "Yes," she responded. "I am supposed to meet a Joshua Miller?" "Oh, you'll meet him soon enough." Meredith smiled a smile that was far from genuine and ran her eye up and down Bella as though she were prized cattle. "He was too busy to meet you himself, so he sent me." Bella avoided eye contact and fidgeted with her suitcase. All that Polly had said about change being good seemed ridiculous now. Bella stood on that platform, feeling for all the world as she had on the day of her parents' death in the house fire. Alone, orphaned, and standing on the edge of tomorrow with no hope in sight. She stared at her feet. "Well, come on. Don't just stand there." Meredith turned away and headed for the wagon. Bella stood for a moment longer to compose herself before following Meredith, remaining as far back as she could without being rude. Hank stood beside the wagon, smoking. He discarded his cigarette and stepped up to relieve Bella of her suitcase. "Ready, miss?" He winked at her, and she felt a little more at ease. "I'm Hank." He held out his hand. "One of Joshua's ranch hands. Sorry he couldn't make it to meet you. He had work he had to attend to. We are to meet him at the ranch." She shook his hand and had the notion they could be friends. He made matters seem somewhat more optimistic than Meredith had. "Bella Brown." She introduced herself to the kind ranch hand. "Pleased to meet you." "Oh, stop yakking and get in the wagon," Meredith said, jumping into the seat beside Hank. Hank helped Bella into the wagon, winked at her, and took up the reins. They rode for 30 minutes in silence, for which Bella was grateful. She was exhausted after her journey and had no desire to converse with this odd woman. She spent her time looking out over the landscape. It was March, a fickle month, favoring snow one week and sunshine the next. Bella left a snowy New York to be greeted in Montana by spring-like weather. While the breeze was cool, it was a welcome reprieve from the stuffiness on the train. She felt the wind lift her braid and set it down again upon her shoulder, and heard a robin or two during the trip to the ranch. She thought about what it meant to travel through life. Was it always this way, winter one day and spring the next? She smiled about the unknown, and then frowned again, thinking of the aloof woman in the front seat. how differently she treated Bella compared with Hank. She decided to cease overthinking her life, for now anyway, and lean into the rhythmic ride across this unknown land. Joshua watched them pull up in front of his house. His heart was beating so hard, he was afraid they would all hear it from the wagon. He jumped down and rushed to help Bella. He reached out his hand, and she took it shyly, meeting his eyes. His heart stopped. Her blue, soulful eyes set off her chocolate brown hair as a flower against springtime rain. He watched as wisps of hair freed of her braid framed her face and stood soft against the backdrop of her beauty. He smiled at her as she stepped off of the wagon and held her hand a little longer than necessary. Joshua Miller had never been in love before. Truth be told, he had been courting this ranch for the last 5 years. He didn't know what it meant to value someone above all else, to be willing to lay down his life for another person. But he had a feeling all of that was about to change. "Mr. Miller?" Hank was looking at him, smiling sideways. "What would you like me to do with Bella's things?" Joshua cleared his throat and tore his gaze away from Bella. "Thank you for taking Meredith to fetch Bella. If you will take her suitcase down to the empty cabin, I think we can go ahead and get her settled." He turned to Meredith. "Meredith, can you make sure the cabin is in order? I cleaned it today myself, but the bed linens may need a little straightening." Meredith looked at Joshua and simply nodded her head. Joshua turned back to Bella and softened his voice. "Bella, if you want to come inside for a few minutes, we can talk about the next few weeks. I've made us some tea." Bella nodded, and tears stung her eyes. No one had made tea for her since she was 5 years old. She blinked them back and nodded. "Yes, that sounds wonderful." They walked into the house, leaving Hank and Meredith outside. Meredith watched the exchange between Bella and Joshua with utter dismay. She could not believe this was happening to her. She stood silently in front of the house, not moving. Hank put his arm around her. "What's the matter, Meredith? Cat got your tongue?" She furrowed her brow and thought for a minute. He said she was going to stay here for 3 weeks before he married her. A lot can happen in 3 weeks, don't you think, Hank? He removed his arm. "Meredith, I don't like the tone of your voice." She smiled a sweet smile that never reached her eyes. "I'm just saying, Hank, he doesn't know her at all, does he? He has no idea what she's capable of." She turned to head in the direction of Bella's new house. "I think maybe it's what you are capable of that scares me," Hank muttered as he drove the horse down the hill to unload Bella's things. Meredith was a spitfire, and he knew it. What he didn't know was how far she would go to get her way, and he wasn't sure he wanted to find out. The next day, Bella awoke in the small cabin on the big ranch and felt instantly at home. She had not had that feeling in so long. It was like a sunrise in and of itself. She sat up, the quilt falling down around the edge of the bed, and she fingered the stitches, wondering if Joshua's mother had made it. Joshua had told her of his mother and father over tea the day before, and her heart went out to him. Perhaps they weren't so different after all. She had been orphaned and become a servant to her aunt. He had been orphaned and become a servant on his own ranch. She understood why he had sent for her. They had decided that she would get to work right away on tasks Meredith had taken care of, to get acclimatized to the new life. First and foremost, she was to take over some of the meal preparation, assisting Meredith at first. Concerned about how this would go over with the feisty maid, Joshua had assured Bella that he would have plenty of jobs for Meredith, and as long as her job wasn't in danger, she should have nothing to fear. She got herself ready and walked up to his house. She watched the sun rise up over the east field. Hank was working with a calf who was having a hard time, and Bella laughed as the calf knocked him over and into the mud. He glanced up from the ground and shouted something at the calf that Bella couldn't hear. She continued on to the house and saw Joshua standing on the front porch holding 2 cups of coffee. He held 1 cup out to her as she ascended the stairs to the front porch and nodded out toward the field. "Looks like Hank is struggling with one of the new calves," Bella giggled. "Sure seems that way. I'm not sure he's winning." She drank her coffee. Joshua shook his head and smiled. "Hank is the best ranch hand I have, and his mother is the sweetest woman you ever met. She's a seamstress in town. I told her you were coming, and she's chomping at the bit to make you dresses appropriate for ranch life. She informed me that, coming from New York, you wouldn't have the appropriate clothing. He laughed and took a drink of his coffee, remembering his conversation with the older woman. She was a mother figure to him after he had hired Hank, and he was grateful for her kind and generous spirit. Well, she may be right about that, said Bella. I didn't bring much with me, being unsure of what I would need. She hadn't yet told him her entire story, and he needn't know she had brought all that she owned. Joshua smiled at her. I will get you two acquainted soon. They stood together on the front porch in a comfortable silence, the soft breeze singing in the tall grasses in the pasture. Well, should I go inside and see what I can learn about ranch life now that I've finished my coffee? Of course. Meredith is in the kitchen already. He drained his cup and nodded toward the house. May I? She reached for his coffee cup, her hand brushing his as she took it from him. He watched her walk inside, the back of his hand still warm from her touch. Chapter 6. Meredith was peeling potatoes in the kitchen when Bella walked in. I assume you have never had to peel or fry your own potatoes, but out here there is work to be done. She all but threw the potato peeler at Bella. Here, get to work. I have other things to attend to. And with that, she left Bella to the potatoes. Bella stared after her incredulously, anger boiling up inside of her. She hadn't traveled all the way across the country to be treated out here the same way she was in New York. She turned to the stove where something was burning. Oh my! She exclaimed as she rushed to remove the skillet. She grabbed the iron handle, forgetting it would be hot, and screamed in pain, dropping the skillet full of potatoes onto the floor. The crash brought Meredith running. What in the world did you do? She looked at Bella as if she had grown horns. I didn't know you already had potatoes on the stove. Why didn't you tell me? Meredith rolled her eyes. I am not here to hold the hand of some spoiled rich girl from New York. Bella's voice shook with anger. I am not a spoiled rich girl from New York. As she finished that statement, Joshua walked in to see Bella staring at Meredith with such anger that it startled him. What's going on here? He asked. Meredith's face changed to show both concern and apprehension. Joshua, I don't know what happened. I showed Bella how to peel and fry potatoes, but I guess she didn't quite understand. She turned to Bella. I didn't mean to make you angry, Bella. I can see you needed more help. Joshua, you go on back to the fields. I will handle things in here. The washing can wait. It looks like Bella will need more specific instruction on how to use the stove. Bella stood silent, unable to believe what she was hearing. Not only was Meredith downright mean, she was a liar. This was new territory for Bella. She could handle people treating her poorly. She could handle being blamed for things. But this was different entirely. Her aunt and cousins, and even her uncle at times, had treated her badly, but they did so no matter who was around. They never even pretended to like her. She was not sure how to process this situation. Joshua smiled at Bella kindly before he left. I'm sure it was a mistake that can be cleared up with a little more instruction. Thank you, Meredith, for helping her out. He left to finish the chores, and Meredith's smile disappeared with the closing of the front door. Meredith glared at Bella. If you think I'm cleaning up this mess, you are sorely mistaken. You get it cleaned up while I make Joshua's breakfast. I can do it faster without you under my feet. Why do you hate me so? Bella asked her. Hate you? Meredith laughed. I don't hate you, dear. That would imply you were worth thinking about long enough to form an opinion. I have no feelings about you whatsoever, and I have a feeling I'm not the only one who feels that way, she said, looking out the window at Joshua. Bella followed her gaze and watched while Joshua helped Hank with the new calf. Maybe Meredith was right. No one had loved her since her parents died. Why would that change now? The days that followed were a blur as Bella cooked, laundered, and had a short, curt lesson in gardening. It was almost time to plant vegetable seeds in the small garden out the back door, but Meredith was not keen on properly teaching Bella how it was to be done. Truth be told, she wasn't interested in teaching Bella much of anything. Thankfully, Bella was used to housework and needed little help there. Gardening was another matter. but no pointers would be coming from Meredith, so Bella would learn it the way she had learned most things in her life, alone and quickly. "How are you liking the ranch so far?" Joshua asked Bella over breakfast one morning. "I like it very much. I can't believe it's already been 3 days," Bella answered him. "I would like to take you into town today. I need to get a few things at the general store, and I know Hank's mother is dying to meet you." He smiled at her from across the table, and she looked down. She didn't know whether to believe Meredith about Joshua's feeling toward her, or whether to believe what she thought she saw in his eyes. "I would love that," she answered. That afternoon, Joshua finished his chores, and together they rode into town in the wagon, neither one talking for the first few minutes. "So, tell me more about your aunt and uncle," he said, holding the reins lightly. "All I know so far is that they took you in when your parents passed away in the fire." Bella was silent for a moment. "Yes. After the fire, I went to live with them right away. I don't remember much about the fire or the weeks after it. My first real memory of that time is my aunt showing me my room." Bella blushed, afraid she had said too much. "Oh, did they make it up for you?" Joshua asked. "Not exactly." Bella looked out the wagon over the horizon. Joshua could sense something was bothering her. "Were they kind to you, Bella?" "Not exactly," she whispered. "Is that why you came out here?" he asked. Bella didn't have the heart to tell him how they had forced her to come, so she offered what she considered a truthful answer. "In a way, yes." Joshua looked over at her. "Well, as much as I hate anything you had to endure, I am, in a way, glad for any circumstance that brought you here." He took her hand then, and she felt her face flush. He held it gently for the duration of the trip to town, and she was afraid to move for fear of breaking the spell. Maple Hill was bustling with women and men walking up and down the wooden sidewalks and going in and out of shops. They drove past the general store and right onto the seamstress's shop. Bella read the sign over the door. The Pin Cushion. What a clever name. Bella laughed lightly, and Joshua thought it sounded like music. Joshua, a rosy, older woman in a red dress, came bustling over as soon as Joshua and Bella walked in. "My goodness, you haven't been eating enough. You look thin as a rail." She turned her attention to a shy Bella standing beside him. "And you must be Bella. I have been just dying to meet you. How do you like Maple Hill so far? And the ranch?" "Oh, I like it very much, Mrs. Cavalier, and Hank has been very nice to me." "Well, he had better. I did raise him to treat a lady right, no matter where she's from. Now, come pick out some fabric for your new dress. You will need some things once you are wed, and I mean to make it a wedding present to you. And please, call me Laura." Bella blushed at her assumption of a definite marriage, but Joshua didn't even flinch. He just winked at her and said, "I'll leave you two to it. I am running to the mercantile and will be back to get you. Laura, be sure to take care of her." "You just leave her to me, Joshua, and go get your errands done. And for goodness sakes, get some food that will stick to your ribs. You are too thin." The next hour was lovely. Having lost her mother as a young child and living with an aunt who despised her, Bella hadn't been coddled or fussed over for a very long time. She rather liked it and was positively glowing when Joshua returned. Laura showed Joshua what she and Bella had picked out, and he nodded approvingly. "Looks like it was a productive day," he said. "Well, come give me a hug, both of you. And don't stay away long, you hear? Sprosity. Oh, and you tell that boy of mine that if I ever hear of him coming to town again and not poking his head in here, I will let him have it. I don't care how old he is." "Yes, ma'am," Joshua laughed as he and Bella hugged her in turn. Laura stood in the doorway and waved to them until they had made their way down the street. "Laura is the most delightful woman I have ever met," Bella said to Joshua as they drove toward the ranch. "She is a remarkable woman, I agree, but I know one who rivals her, I think," he said to Bella, turning to wink at her. Bella was fairly certain that if he winked at her again, she would stop breathing altogether. Chapter 7. Joshua pulled off the road and wound his way around to a grove of trees. The sun was beginning to sink in the western sky. "Where are we going?" Bella asked him. "It's a surprise." They wound through the trees and stopped on the edge of a ravine. Bella caught her breath. My goodness, it's beautiful. He jumped down from the wagon, tethered the horses, and removed some parcels. I picked up some things at the mercantile so we could have a picnic. Bella helped him smooth his blanket over the ground, and he motioned for her to sit while he laid out the goodies. She looked out over the ravine. The sun was starting to sink, and the colors fell in ribbons across the horizon. Behind them, the trees stood in a natural semicircle, as if they were planted for this very purpose, to sit among them, back to the world, and stare out over tomorrow. He finished laying out cheese, breads, cured sausage, and lemonade. "How did you ever find this place?" she asked him, leaning over to get a bite of cheese. He laughed. "Well, when I was new to ranching, one of my young horses got loose. I chased him all the way from the ranch to here and could not find him for the life of me. I went back to the ranch to saddle a fresh horse." He pointed up to the road they had taken to get there. "I rode all along that road up there and through the trees and back again on both sides. Still, I couldn't find him. I decided to ride in farther, and that horse was standing right here, watching the sunset." He shook his head at the memory. "I dismounted and stood beside him, and I knew then that we weren't that different. His mother had died during his foaling, and he had raised himself, so to speak, as a part of the herd. I know it's just a horse, but I swear he was looking out over that ravine with the same appreciation we have." He took a bite of sausage. "Anyway, it's been my favorite place ever since." "What's the horse's name?" she asked. "Mackie, and there isn't another like him. I take it you still have him?" "Oh, yes," he replied. "I wouldn't trade him for 100 horses. He and I ride out here at least once a week. I don't even have to tie him up when we come. It's like he knows." They were both silent for a moment before Joshua spoke again. "Mackie is the only one I've ever brought out here, until today." Bella turned to hide her blush, and Joshua took her hand again. "You know," he said, "you are nothing like your letters, better in every way, though I am still waiting on that apple dumpling." She looked at him blankly. "I don't understand." "The dumpling you promised me, along with fair warning about the coffee." He grinned at the memory. "I believe your exact words were, 'I make a fine apple dumpling, though I confess I burn the coffee.'" The color drained from her face. "Joshua." Her voice came out very small. "I never wrote you any letters." The words sat between them like a stone. He laughed and waited for the joke to show itself. It didn't. Her eyes were wide and frightened, and her hand had gone still in his. "5 letters," he said slowly. "Signed with your name, your sewing, your cooking, a line about hoping Montana had room for a small person with small dreams. I have them at the house, tied with string. I have never set one word on paper for you." Her hands twisted together in her lap. "I didn't know your name until my aunt spoke it. I didn't know I was coming west at all until she told me to pack for the Saturday train." Joshua sat very still. "Tell me," he said. "All of it." So she told him. The aunt who rang bells, the uncle who drank. The morning Sarah walked into the kitchen and announced that a transaction had been completed, one that involved Bella. She kept her voice flat and steady, the way a person does when the story is too heavy to carry any other way. When she finished, Joshua stood and walked to the edge of the ravine. He took off his hat and held it, as though he were at a funeral. "They told me you answered my advertisement," he said. "The 2 men, they said you were willing, eager even. Every question I ever asked, those letters answered so prettily." He shook his head slowly. "And not one of them ever asked me anything back. I told myself that was shyness. I never saw any advertisement." "No." He was quiet a moment. "Then they sold you." He said it to the ravine, not to her. "Your own family sold you, and I paid the men who managed it. You didn't know. That doesn't unmake it." He turned around, and there was something in his face she had never seen in a man before. Shame, worn openly. "Bella, listen to me now. There is money enough for a ticket east to any town you care to name, and I will put you on that train myself. Or the cabin is yours for as long as you want it, and you will owe me nothing, not marriage, not courting, not so much as a kind word at breakfast. I will not hold you to a bargain that 2 liars struck in your name." The wind moved through the semicircle of trees. Below them, the ravine was filling up with evening light. Bella looked out over it for a long time. Her whole life, other people had done the choosing. The fire had chosen for her when she was 5. Her aunt had chosen the attic room, the bells, the 14 years of silence. Her uncle had chosen her price. 2 strangers in a tavern had chosen Montana. What would it be like, she wondered, to choose something herself? To stand in front of a door and open it because she wanted to know what was on the other side? I did not choose to come here, she said at last, but I can choose whether I stay. Joshua hardly breathed. Your advertisement promised 3 weeks, she went on. A courtship before any talk of marrying. I should like to have it, properly, as though I had answered you myself. A small light came into her eyes, the first he had seen since the letters were spoken of. And when the 3 weeks are up, if you still wish to, you may ask me something. Done. He put his hat back on, and the grief in his face gave way to something steadier. Though I warn you, I intend to make a strong case for myself. See that you do, Mr. Miller. A thing given can be taken away. That is the way of gifts, and orphans learn it early. A thing chosen is another matter entirely. Well, we had better be headed back. They will be wondering where we are. Joshua and Bella packed up the picnic, loaded the wagon, and rode back to the ranch. Once she got all settled into her new temporary bedroom, Bella got out her pencil and paper and wrote her first poem since coming to this new place. Into the sun I walk out free. No bell, no bargain. Deciding for me, a door swung open. I could have flown. I chose the staying. I chose my own. She smiled at the short poem and decided Meredith was wrong. Joshua did seem to like her, and she would not let the maid steal her joy. She smiled as she slept and dreamt of flowers and white dresses and robins who build their nests in newly planted cherry trees on a ranch in Montana. The next morning, Bella woke up to someone knocking on her door. She threw on her dress, opened the door, and peeked her head out. Dawn had broken, but the sun was yet to peek over the horizon. The air was chilly, and she shivered. "Bella, it's me, Joshua," he whispered. The sound of his voice warmed her. He spoke again. "Can you meet me for a walk?" "Let me get dressed," she said, and closed the door and leaned up against it, trying to slow her beating heart. Bella walked out in the early morning, the air turning her cheeks a rosy red. Joshua pulled a bouquet of dead grass out from behind his back, smiling sheepishly. "There aren't any flowers yet, so—" Bella's laugh rang through the early morning like a church bell greeting its congregation. "I think this is positively the most beautiful bouquet I've ever been given." Joshua looked at her teasingly. "Have you been given many bouquets?" She tossed her head. "No, actually, this is my first, so that makes it the most beautiful." They laughed together and walked over the pastures, talking of their past, their future, and everything in between. Joshua watched the sun as it seemed to sail into the sky and thought about the woman beside him. He was starting to shoulder the weight of her protection and her happiness, and it made him nervous and excited all at the same time. "Do you think you'll be happy here, Bella? With me?" They stopped walking, and he looked at her earnestly. "Oh, Joshua, I think I could be happy with you anywhere. I feel as though I can do anything with you by my side." He looked down at her and knew, with a certainty that scared him, exactly where this was heading. "Have you ever considered planting cherry trees?" she asked him as they continued walking. "I can't say as I have," he said, amused by her question, "but I do like cherry pie." She linked her arm through his. "How about you plant me some cherry trees and I'll make you cherry pies? How's that for a trade-off?" Joshua smiled down at her. "Deal." From the kitchen window, Meredith watched them, seething. Chapter 8. The pounding on her door came before dawn. "Miss Bella," it was Hank's voice, ragged at the edges. "We've a heifer in trouble, and the boss needs hot water. Kitchen's dark, and I can't leave the barn." She was dressed in 2 minutes. In the main house, she stoked the stove with hands that remembered 1,000 cold mornings, set the big kettle on, and gathered every clean rag in the kitchen. When she came across the yard with the steaming pail, the lantern light was spilling out of the calving shed and the heifer was down in the straw, groaning. Joshua knelt behind her, sleeves rolled past his elbows, his forearms slick. He glanced up and she saw him brace for it. City women fainted at less. He had heard so. "You had better wait outside," he said. Bella set the pail down where he could reach it and knelt at the heifer's head. "I had better not." The heifer rolled a white eye and bellowed. Bella laid a hand on the flat plane of the animal's cheek and began to hum, low and even, the way a person hums to a frightened child. The heifer's breathing slowed a little. "The calf's turned," Joshua said through his teeth. "Been laboring since midnight. Hank, the rope." The next hour was blood and straw and steam in the lantern light. Bella tore rags without being asked, kept the water coming, held the heifer's head down through the worst of it with her whole slight weight. Not once did she flinch, not once did she look away. Just before sunup, the calf came in a rush, dark and glistening, and lay still. "Rub it," Joshua said. "Hard now." She was already on her knees in the straw with a fistful of sacking. She rubbed until her arms burned, and the little chest heaved, and the calf sneezed straw dust into her face and bawled with astonishing opinion for something 10 minutes old. Bella sat back on her heels and laughed. There was straw in her hair and blood to her elbows, and the laugh came all the way up from her boots. Joshua looked at her across the steaming calf. The letters had promised him a needlewoman who made dumplings. No letter in the world could have promised him this. Hank latched the pen and grinned into the new morning. "Well, boss," he said, to no one in particular, "I'd say she'll do." Afterward, the three of them stood in the yard while the sun came up proper, drinking coffee that Bella had somehow also managed at some point to make. Her hem was ruined. Her braid had surrendered entirely. "Your letters never mentioned cattle," Joshua said. "My letters," said Bella with great dignity, "never mentioned a good many of my talents." Evidently. He looked at her over the rim of his cup, at the straw in her hair and the mourning all around her, and he thought that a man could do worse than spend 50 years finding out the rest of them. The heifer recovered. The calf thrived. Bella named him Duke, over Hank's objection that you can't name beef. And from that morning on, Duke followed her along the fence line like a dog whenever she walked to the house. Even the cattle, Hank observed, had picked their side. By the end of the first week, the morning walk had become their custom. They went out before the day's work claimed them, when the grass was still gray with dew, and they talked of small things or of nothing at all. Bella had come to measure her days from one walk to the next. On the 6th morning, the wind was up. She had carried her basket of washing to the line behind the cabin, her notepad tucked on top where she always kept it, out of habit older than Montana. The wind flipped the cover, considered its options, and took the top page clean off across the yard. Bella dropped the basket and ran. The page tumbled and skated and pinwheeled past the well, past the woodpile, gathering speed like a thing that knew it was being chased. It fetched up at last against the corral rail, pinned flat by the very wind that had stolen it. A hand closed over it before she could get there. Joshua's hand. "Caught it," he said, pleased with himself, and then his eyes went to the page. She saw them move along the first line and the second before he understood what he was holding. He stopped reading at once and held it out to her, face up, the way a man hands back something private. "I beg your pardon, Bella. I read 2 lines before I knew what it was." She took the page and pressed it to her skirt, cheeks burning. 14 years of hiding rose up in her at once. Poems scribbled by moonlight and buried under her mattress. Words kept secret the way other women keep jewelry, because words were the one thing in that house that had belonged to her. "It's nothing," she said, scribbling. "It's about the sparrow," he said it quietly, "the one that isn't afraid of the ground." The wind moved between them. Bella looked up at him, and something in her chest turned over, slow and enormous, like earth under a plow. "Read it to me," Joshua said. "If you're willing, I'd rather hear it than steal it." So she stood by the corral rail with the washing forgotten and read to him in a voice that steadied as it went. "Low flies the sparrow over the winter wheat, nothing above her but sky and sleet, nothing below her but frozen clay. Still she goes singing along her way, for spring is a promise, the cold can't break, and even a sparrow can stay awake." When she finished, he was silent for so long she thought she had made a fool of herself. Then he took off his hat, as though the yard had briefly become a church. "Again," he said. "The part where the cold can't break the promise." She read it again. Nobody in all her 19 years had ever asked to hear anything of hers twice. Her aunt had called her scribbling idleness. Her cousins had called it airs. And this man with straw dust on his shoulders stood in the wind with his hat in his hands and asked for the second verse. "You ought to have a proper book to keep them in," Joshua said, "not a pad that feeds the wind. There are bound journals at the mercantile, leather ones. Poems don't need leather." "No," he agreed, "but yours ought to have it anyway." Bella went back to her washing. The line filled up with shirts that cracked and billowed, and she pinned each one with great attention because it gave her somewhere to look. Some things are too new to be looked at directly. Joy is one of them. In the pocket of her apron, the sparrow poem sat folded into quarters, warm as a coal. On the seventh day, the sugar was ruined. Meredith discovered it loudly at breakfast, with Joshua not 3 steps away. The crock stood open on the table, and she lifted a spoonful and let it fall. "Salt," she announced. "The whole crock, salted through. A month's sugar fit for nothing." She turned to Bella with a face full of sorrowful patience. "You filled it last, dear. From which sack?" "I haven't touched the sugar crock," Bella said. "Of course you haven't." Meredith sighed the sigh of a woman bearing up bravely. "Just as no one touched the preserves." 2 jars of last summer's chokecherry preserves had been found shattered on the cellar floor the day before, sticky and glittering among their own ruins. Meredith had swept them up herself, mournfully, mentioning it only 4 or 5 times. Joshua ate his eggs and said little, but Bella, watching him, saw the small crease come and go between his brows, and her stomach tightened around a feeling she knew of old. She had grown up in a house where things broke, and the blame always knew its way to her door. She recognized the pattern the way you recognize a smell. That afternoon she found the salt sack and the sugar sack sitting side by side in the pantry, innocent as churchgoers. They looked nothing alike. In the kitchen behind her, Meredith hummed while she worked, sweet and tuneless, like a kettle just starting to think about boiling. On the 8th day, Joshua loaded the wagon before breakfast and covered the load with canvas. "Errand to run," was all he said. Company would be welcome. They drove east under a washed blue sky, past the ravine road into country Bella hadn't seen. The track grew thinner, and the fences leaned. At last, a low cabin came into view with a sagging lean-to beside it, and a thin ribbon of smoke standing up from the chimney like a question. "The Tully place," Joshua said. "Amos broke his leg in the February ice, 6 weeks flat on his back, with 4 children and 30 head to feed." He drew up by the lean-to, not the house, and folded back the canvas. A quarter of beef wrapped in sacking, 2 bags of flour, a crate of seed potatoes, sprouting and ready. He carried it all into the lean-to and stacked it neatly where it would be found, and he did it fast like a man committing a robbery in reverse. The cabin door opened as they were climbing back onto the wagon. A worn woman stood in it with a baby on her hip, and her mouth worked without finding words. "Ada," said Joshua, touching his hat, "tell Amos those potatoes want planting by May. That's all the message." "Joshua Miller, we can't keep—" "Pay me when the leg mends," he said, "or don't. It makes no difference to the potatoes." He clucked to the horses before her thanks could catch him, and they rolled out of the yard at a pace just short of fleeing. For a mile or so, Bella said nothing. Then she asked, "Does anyone know you do this?" "You do. That's already one too many." He glanced sideways at her, half a smile. "A gift stops being a gift when it gets talked about, Bella. Talked about, it's a debt I have no use for being owed." She turned that over for the rest of the ride, quiet as a woman counting. She had known men who gave nothing. She had known men, her uncle chief among them, who took whatever wasn't nailed down and called it his due. She had not known there was a third kind of man, one who gave in secret and drove away fast, embarrassed to be caught at kindness. The ranch came into view below them, and her heart did the thing it had begun doing lately at the sight of it. Some houses are made of logs, the old tales say, and some are made of what their people do when no one is watching. Bella was beginning to see which kind she had come to. Chapter 9. Sunday came, and with it church. Bella had known it was coming all week, the way you know weather is coming. It was one thing to be Joshua's guest on a ranch 3 miles from anywhere. It was another to walk into a white clapboard church on his arm, while the whole of Maple Hill turned in its pews like a field of sunflowers finding the sun. "Steady," Joshua murmured, and put her hand through his elbow. The whispering was general and entirely friendly, which somehow made it worse. Laura had saved them places in the third pew and beamed at Bella as though she had personally invented her. The preacher, a mild man with spectacles, welcomed our newest neighbor from the pulpit, and 40 heads nodded at her in unison. After the service came the covered dish supper in the churchyard, and after the blessing came the women. They arrived in twos and threes, bearing pie and questions in roughly equal measure. Was it true she was from New York City itself? Did she find Montana very wild? Had she ever seen the ocean? Mrs. Pruitt, a stout woman with the eyes of a happy hawk, asked outright whether a date had been set, and the entire pie table fell silent to hear the answer. "We are still in our 3 weeks," Bella said. "They're 3 weeks," Mrs. Pruitt repeated to the table at large, as though this were the most romantic sentence ever uttered in the county. By the reaction, it may have been. Through it all, Joshua stayed within reach. He didn't hover and he didn't stray. When the questions came too fast, he was somehow there with a plate of chicken for her, or a word about the weather that turned the conversation like a gate turns cattle. She had never in her life been protected by anyone. It was some time before she recognized the sensation, having nothing to compare it to. As the light went long and gold, somebody's fiddle came out, the way a fiddle always finds its way out of a wagon by evening. There was no proper dancing, it being Sunday, but the young people walked in slow circuits of the churchyard, 2 by 2, which everyone agreed was a different thing entirely. Joshua offered his arm. Bella took it. They made 3 circuits of the churchyard in the general parade, and if their circuit was slower than the others, the fiddler, who had been young once, slowed his tune to cover for them. "Everyone is looking at us," Bella murmured. "No," said Joshua comfortably. "Everyone is looking at you. I'm just the fellow walking alongside, being envied." Toward evening, the crowd thinned, and the 2 of them went to the wagon through the last of the light, children running shrieking between the buggies. "They'll have us married by Tuesday, the ladies," Joshua said. "Talk is faster than any train. And what did you tell them?" "That the lady is considering her options." He handed her up onto the seat. "And that I am on my very best behavior." From the edge of the churchyard, beside a table she had not been asked to help with, Meredith watched them go. Her plate was full and untouched. When the wagon turned out of sight, she scraped the whole of it into the grass, food and all, and went home the long way, alone. On the 10th day, Bella put the garden in. She planted peas and carrots and onion sets in rows straighter than any ruled line, working from what she remembered of the kitchen garden in New York and from a farmer's almanac Joshua kept over the stove. Then she sat at her small table in the cabin, and she wrote at last to Polly. "Dear Polly," the letter said, in part, "you told me on the train that change is how we grow, and I called it wisdom to be polite. I take it back. It was wisdom in earnest. I have planted a garden, I have helped a calf into the world before sunrise, and was not sick, whatever anyone expected. And I must tell you the strangest thing of all. I came here because of letters I never wrote. When Joshua learned the truth of it, he did not send me away. He opened the door and let me choose. Polly, no one has ever let me choose. I find I cannot say what that is like, even to you, and I can say most things to you. There's a housemaid here who does not want me here. I mind it less than I should, because everyone else wants me here more than anyone ever has." Polly's answer came back within the week, 4 crossed pages in a galloping hand, joy and underlining throughout. Near the end, she wrote, "My aunt says a man who lets a woman choose is worth 6 of the other kind, and my aunt is never wrong, except about bonnets. Now tell me more about this Hank who laughs at calves. You mention him the way one mentions a good bridge, briefly, while walking across it." Bella laughed out loud, alone in her cabin, and read the letter twice more before bed. The quarrel, when it came, arrived over supper on the 11th day, wearing the clothes of an ordinary remark. Joshua was talking of the summer ahead, easy and expansive, a man laying plans, haying in July, cattle to the high pasture, and then, spearing a potato, And once we're wed, you'll have the house entire. Meredith can keep to the washing and the heavy work, and the kitchen will be yours. Cooking, the cleaning, the garden, you'll have charge of all of it." Bella set down her fork. "And there it is," she said quietly. "There what is?" He was still smiling. He meant it kindly. That was the worst of it. "Joshua, I have kept a house since I was 8 years old. I have cooked 3 meals a day for people who never once thanked me, and washed floors before sunrise and answered bells." Her voice stayed quiet, which somehow filled the room more than shouting would have. "I ran from a house where I was the help. I will not marry into another one and call it rescue because the man is kind." The kindness in question sat back as though slapped. "That is not what I—" He stopped, started again, stung now. "This is a working ranch, Bella. Everyone on it works. I'll be in the fields before light and past dark. I'm not offering you a bell to answer. I'm offering you a home to—" He heard it coming and couldn't stop it. "To keep." "And what is the difference," she asked, "between a woman kept to keep a house and a housekeeper?" The clock on the shelf ticked 11 times. She counted every one. "The difference," Joshua said at last, slowly, like a man walking on ice he has just heard crack, "ought to be that one of them is choosing. And I reckon I just now handed you the house the same way your aunt handed you the kettle, without asking." Bella's anger, which had been banked and ready these 14 years, found suddenly that it had nowhere to go. "My mother and father worked side by side," he went on. "The ranch was theirs, the both of them. He never once decided a thing over her head, and she never stood behind his chair like hired help. That's the marriage I saw. It is the only one I know how to want." He turned his coffee cup a slow half circle. "But I've been alone 5 years, Bella. I've gotten used to deciding things by myself out loud and calling it conversation. You'll have to knock that out of me. I'd take it kindly if you'd start tonight." "What would you have me be then?" she asked. "Say it plainly." "A partner. No hesitation at all. Someone to build with, not for. When I said the house would be yours, I meant yours to command, not yours to serve. But that's not what I said, and words matter. You'd know that better than anyone. You're the poet." Outside, the dark came down over the pastures, and the lamp made its small gold room around the table, and they talked longer that night than they had ever talked. What marriage was, what each of them had watched marriage be. She told him about Sarah and Jacob, 2 people lashed together by spite and habit. He told her about his mother reading seed catalogs aloud in winter, while his father argued happily with her choices. "I want the arguing," Bella said at last. "I want the seed catalogs. I have had 14 years of silence, Joshua. I would rather quarrel with you every supper than be silent with anyone else." "Then we'll quarrel," he said solemnly. "Tuesdays, say. I'll mark it in the almanac." Her laughter caught them both by surprise. A quarrel is a fearsome thing to people who have only ever seen quarrels end in fire or in 14 years of frost. It was that night Bella learned a quarrel could end another way. It could end with 2 people still at the table. Chapter 10. On the 12th day, Joshua had business at the mill, and Bella spent the afternoon at the pincushion, standing on a stool in a half-made dress while Laura circled her with pins in her mouth. "Arms up, there, goodness, child. You're narrow as a fence rail. We'll take it in at the waist and let the skirt do the talking." The older woman worked as she chatted, and chatted as she worked. The stove ticked. Rain started soft against the window. And somewhere in the warm clutter of the little shop, Bella heard herself say the thing she had not said to anyone. "Laura, I don't know how to be a wife." The pins stopped. "I know how to keep a house," Bella went on, low. "I can cook for 8 and clean for 10, but I never saw a marriage, not a real one. My parents died when I was 5. After that, I lived with my aunt and uncle, and what they had—" She hunted for words. It was a war where both sides had surrendered and stayed to fight anyway. "That's all I know of husbands and wives. What if it's all I know how to do?" Laura took the pins out of her mouth and set them down with great deliberateness. Then she took Bella's 2 hands in her 2 hands. "Now you listen to me," she said. "I was married to my Cyrus for 22 years. God rest him. And I will tell you the whole secret, free of charge. Marriage isn't kept like a house. It's kept like a promise. You don't scrub it, you just keep it. Morning after morning, the same as he keeps it. And some mornings it's burnt biscuits, and some mornings it's Christmas, and you keep it anyway. She gave Bella's hands a little shake. A girl who can be loyal to a memory for 14 years in that vinegar household can keep a promise to a good man in her sleep. You know how to be a wife, child. You've just never been let. Bella's eyes went hot. She looked hard at the pincushions. As for the rest, Laura said, resuming her pins briskly, because she too was close to the edge of something. The cooking he could hire. The heart he couldn't. Any fool can see which one he sent for. While Bella was changing behind the screen, her folded poem slipped from her sleeve. Laura picked it up to return it and read 3 lines before her conscience caught up with her eyes. She stood very still. Then she put it back in Bella's hand without a word about it and only said at the door, "Bring me another of those to read someday when you're willing. The one about the sparrow." You read it. 3 lines. I'm a weak old woman. Laura buttoned Bella's coat to the top button as though Bella were 7. It was more true than most sermons. At the last moment, on the doorstep with the rain coming down in earnest, Bella turned back. Laura, the maid at the ranch, Meredith. She had not planned to say it. Out it came anyway, the sugar, the preserves, the cold eyes, all of it. I've told no one. I have no proof of anything, and I won't carry tales to Joshua, but things keep happening around me, and She stopped. I wanted one person to know, in case. Laura's face, so quick to crinkle, had gone smooth and grave. Then one person knows, she said. And child, hear me. I've watched that particular young woman since she came to this valley. Some hearts curdle, sitting too long on a want they can't have. You keep your lamp lit and your door latched, and you tell me if so much as a hairpin more goes amiss. She kissed Bella on the forehead, quick and firm. No one had kissed Bella's forehead since she was 5 years old. She cried a little on the way home, in the rain, where it wouldn't show. Some crying is grief. This was the other kind, the kind that happens when a locked room in the heart is opened and aired at last, and found to be undamaged after all. Prisoner Sadie read. Bella walked into the house to prepare lunch after their walk and found Meredith holding a ripped shirt. What did you do to this, Bella? I gave it to you to sew, and it's ruined. Bella looked at her, confused. I've never seen that shirt in my life. You are a liar, Bella Brown, and you know it. This is Joshua's favorite shirt. I'll go ask him what he wants to do about it. She marched right out the door to find Joshua. Bella watched her leave, a confused frown on her face. Joshua was in the barn, brushing Mackie and thinking about Bella when Meredith marched in. Joshua, we have to talk about Bella. What is it? He asked, turning to look at her. It's this shirt. I asked her to sew it because I was overrun with mending. She ripped it, Joshua. And that's not all. She screwed up her face as if she were trying to think of how to voice her concern. I think she did it on purpose to try and make you mad at me. Why would she do that? Are you sure? Joshua asked, confused. Well, look how it's ripped. It looks as though it were actually cut and then pulled at. And she always looks so mad at the world, Meredith sighed. I hate to break it to you, Joshua, but she seems like an angry soul. She is always shouting at me about something. She accused me of cutting this shirt. Can you believe it? As long as I have worked here, I have never even so much as ruined a shirt. I worry about her. And I worry about your future. Meredith looked at him sadly and touched his arm. Joshua went back to brushing his horse, his brow furrowed. Well, thanks, Meredith. I'll keep that in mind. Meredith left Joshua to his beloved horse, and he mulled over all she had said. He remembered walking in on the potato scene and how very angry Bella had looked. The shirt did indeed look to have been intentionally cut, and there was the time Meredith had told him about when Bella had become angry about the seeds. Meredith wasn't counting them fast enough, and Bella had stomped off angrily and not spoken to her. He had noticed that Bella left the room whenever Meredith entered, but he hadn't thought much about it until now. Was Bella one person with Joshua and another with others? He thought about their walk that morning. He was sure Bella didn't do these things. His heart told him to trust Bella, but rationally he couldn't figure an explanation. He needed to run to town for a salve for Mackie's hind leg. He would take Hank with him and talk to him on the way. Maybe he would have some insight into the debacle. Hank and Joshua took the wagon into town that afternoon. They talked about Mackie's leg and about breaking the new calves. Then they were quiet for a while. Hank, what do you think of Bella? Bella? Oh, I think she's a great girl. You did a good thing bringing her here. Do you think she ever seems angry? Hank thought a minute. Not when I'm around, but I'm usually in the fields. I only see her coming and going to her cabin. Sometimes we talk a minute or so, but that's about all. Joshua thought for a minute and decided not to probe further. Hank probably wasn't around Bella enough to know one way or another, but Joshua was concerned. She had been sent here against her will, and she had chosen to stay. He believed that. He believed her. And yet the mishaps kept coming, one upon another, always with Meredith's sorrowful account attached, and he could not make the two things sit together in his mind. He had more questions than answers, it seemed, and it made him uneasy. He wished he could just trust what he knew to be true about her, but he could not. He had made a living by questioning everything, and then making decisions based on facts and weather and livestock prices. He had become successful this way. He didn't know how to jump headlong into big life decisions without weighing all of the options. Hank was looking at him sideways. Joshua wondered how long he had been sitting there thinking. He cleared his throat. "Oh, I saw your mother a few days ago, and she said..." Hank rolled his eyes. I know. We had better go see her while we are here, or she will tan both of our hides." They laughed as they saw the town come into sight. That evening, Meredith went down toward the barn to press her case a little further and stopped outside the door because there were voices inside. Not saying she did or she didn't. That was Hank, careful as a man crossing a creek on stones. I'm saying it's a powerful lot of mishaps for one small woman. It is, Joshua's voice. Tired. The shirt, the sugar, the garden this morning, half a row of peas tramped flat, and the gate standing open that Bella swears she latched. A pause, and the sound of a brush moving over a horse's flank. And here's what I keep coming back to, Hank. I've watched her with a laboring heifer, and with old lady Pruitt's questions, and with a wind that stole her washing. Never once mean, never once false. A person can hide a temper from a man. I don't believe a person can hide it from animals and weather. The brush stopped. The 3 weeks are up on Tuesday week. I mean to ask her properly. I'd have told you first, but I reckon you knew. I reckon the whole county knows, said Hank, and laughed his easy laugh. Outside in the blue dusk, Meredith stood very still. So the little accidents had done nothing. Worse than nothing. Every mishap had only given him another chance to take Bella's part, and he had taken it every time, and now there was a proposal coming on Tuesday week like a train on a schedule. Subtlety had failed. Something less subtle would be needed. Something that could not be brushed aside or explained or forgiven. Something that would put Bella Brown on the eastbound train once and for all. Meredith walked back to her cabin the long way, past the summer kitchen. On a shelf inside its door sat the household's spare things, a coil of wick, a tin of matches, and the old glass lamp that was kept filled against the day the good ones failed. When she came out again, her shawl was wrapped around something, held close, the way a woman carries eggs. The shelf stood one lamp short. In a busy ranch house in springtime, nobody counts lamps. By the next nightfall, it no longer mattered. Chapter 11. Bella was in her cabin, having decided not to spend the day in the main house. Joshua and Hank had ridden into town, and she didn't want to spend time with Meredith. She would work on knitting socks and maybe read a book. A quiet evening after a day with Meredith sounded just about right. She didn't know what to do about Meredith after she and Joshua were wed, but she figured she would cross that bridge when they came to it. Something caught her eye out the window. She looked up and saw a flash and squinted her eyes to get a better look. The barn. Something was flickering inside the barn. She dropped her knitting into her lap and stared. She was very much there, in this cabin, on this ranch, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She was suddenly a little girl again, under a table listening to two people arguing, two men. She closed her eyes, trying to remember. Outside her window, the flicker became brighter and became flames engulfing the stable. She felt very hot. She opened her eyes, and the stable stood blazing against the night sky. Bella screamed when she saw someone run from the stables. Then she was in New York again, standing outside her house as it burned, watching someone running from it toward the road. Her eyes flew open and she remembered. Two men arguing, the lamp going over in the struggle, glass and flame across her mother's good floor, and her uncle in the doorway with the firelight rising up his face, looking at it, looking straight at it, and then running. Not for water, not for help, not shouting the alarm to wake the street. Running for the road with his coat pulled up, while somewhere in that house her mother never knew. He had left them all to burn, and he had never once called out. Outside the window, the fire was raging. She saw Hank and Joshua ride by. The flames stood so high now that the light of them filled her little room like day. Move, she told herself. Move. Her legs would not obey her. The 5-year-old under the kitchen table still had hold of them. Then, through the wall, through the roar, she heard a sound that cut her loose from the past like a knife through rope. A horse was screaming. Mackie. She was out the door in her nightdress before she knew she had risen. The heat met her in the yard like a wall, unbelievable, a living thing that pushed her backward with both hands. Men were shouting somewhere by the water trough. The stable's near end was a sheet of flame, but the big door on the far end was not yet burning, and she ran for it with cinders raining on her shoulders. The iron latch had drunk the fire's heat, and she did not know it until she had it in both hands. The pain was white and total. She got the latch up anyway. She hauled at the door, and it gave a foot, and smoke rolled out at her thick as wool, and somewhere in that terrible orange dark the screaming went on. She pulled again, sobbing, calling the horse's name to a wall of smoke. The heat won. It came out of the doorway in a solid gust and flung her back into the yard, and the world narrowed to a ring of fire and noise, and then to a point, and then it went out altogether. The last thing she knew was the ground striking her, and men's voices coming nearer, and one voice above all the others crying out her name. She awoke to Hank standing over her. Bella, Bella, she could hear him calling, but it sounded far away, as if in a dream somewhere. What happened? She asked as she opened her eyes. There was a fire, Bella. In the stable. He looked as though he had been up all night. Suddenly everything came back to her, and she remembered the fire all those years ago and her uncle running from her parents' house. She remembered the fire last night and the men yelling and riding by her window. Is everyone okay? Pros 7%, she asked, pulling herself up into a sitting position in bed. Hank sat down in the chair by the window and put his head in his hands. He sat for a long time before speaking. He looked up at her, and she thought she could see tears in his eyes. We lost Mackie, he said hoarsely. Bella froze. What? Why didn't someone get him out? We tried, Bella. By the time we got to the stables, the fire was out of control. The other horses were in the field, but Joshua had put Mackie in the stable on account of his leg. He didn't want it to get infected before he could get that salve on it. He's beating himself up now for not leaving him in the pasture with the others. Hank put his head in his hands again. How is he, Hank? Bella asked quietly. She knew how much he loved that horse. I will get myself presentable and go to him. She was still reeling from her resurrected memory of her uncle and the true circumstances behind her childhood trauma. But that would have to wait. Joshua needed her. I wouldn't do that, Bella. Hank looked at her with confusion in his eyes. Why on earth not? She asked incredulously. There's more. He hesitated before he spoke again. Joshua seems to think you started the fire. What? Bella asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked down and saw for the first time that her hands were wrapped in strips of clean linen. It came back to her in pieces. The latch, the smoke, the screaming she could not reach. Hank, I was trying to get the door open. I heard Mackie. Hank looked at her with sadness in his eyes. It was Joshua who carried you in. You were lying in the yard, not 10 feet from that door, with your palms burned raw. Half the county would call that proof you tried to save the horse. But Joshua watched his barn burn down with you lying in the light of it, Bella. Grief does its own arithmetic. I believe you. I do. But the fire didn't start by itself, and until somebody can say how it did start, all he can see is where you were found. Bella lifted her chin indignantly. I haven't told a lie of this magnitude in my life, and I'm not about to start now. Not when my life is finally looking up. Not when I've finally found a home. Her voice broke, and she began to cry. Hank leaned forward. Before you went out into the yard, did you see anything from your window? She looked up at him. I did see someone running from the barn. Are you sure? Could you tell anything about the person you saw? I'm positive, she said. She thought for a minute. It was dark. I couldn't make out anything other than a figure running. Hank's heart went out to her. She looked dejected. Bella had been nothing but kind since she arrived, and she had made Joshua happy. The story Joshua told him just didn't fit. Even if it was an accident, Bella didn't seem like a liar to him. Listen, Bella, I believe you. Give me time to get to the bottom of this. Until then, just give Joshua some space. He needs some time to process and to grieve. Bella nodded. In all honesty, she needed some time to process what she learned last night as well. Thank you, Hank. He nodded to her and left her alone in the cabin. The orphaned girl sat alone on her bed, mulling over the situation which brought her here and the one currently developing. There was no easy answer to either. She spent the morning writing and crying and trying to put together the pieces of her fragmented memory. Once, she unwound the linen from her right hand and studied the two straight burn lines that crossed the palm. The truth had written itself into her skin, and the writing told the wrong story. That was the way of evidence, she was learning. It says where you stood. It never says why. Ignis. Hank was working on the barn when he saw Meredith walk by. Hey, Meredith, he shouted. She detoured and walked over his way. How's the rebuilding going? She asked him. He shook his head, slow. Well, it's only been a week. I guess, he replied. Have you talked to Joshua? Oh, yes. She flipped her hair. He seems quite disenchanted with that Bella. Thank goodness. I'm hopeful he will have her on a train by the end of next week. Her eyes were positively shining. I just don't understand. Hank looked at the barn. It doesn't seem like her to burn down a barn and then lie about it. Well, I don't think any of us know her at all. She just came in on a train. We don't know her family, her history, or where she's really from. She could be anyone, she shrugged her shoulders. Plus, it was probably an accident, she said, trying to feign giving her the benefit of the doubt. We all know how easy it is to knock over a lamp. Hank froze and looked at her slowly. How did you know it was a lamp? Meredith looked at him. Well, you told me, she laughed nervously. Don't you remember? Hank narrowed his eyes. I just found the lamp this morning. I haven't even told Joshua yet. It was buried in the rubble and barely recognizable. He tried to read her face. Meredith, I'm going to ask you one time, and I want the truth. Did you do this and blame Bella? That is ridiculous, she shrugged. I cannot believe this. I knew you wanted Joshua for yourself, but this is low, Meredith, even for you. He looked at her with disgust. She steadied her gaze and met his. You can't prove a thing, Hank. All you have is a burned-up lamp, and it is your word against mine. And who do you think Joshua will believe? He asked her angrily. I'm going to talk to Joshua now. You won't get away with this. You are injuring that poor girl and Joshua to boot. I think he might have loved her if you hadn't gotten involved. Meredith looked at him and smiled slowly. How is your mother's shop faring these days? Hank looked confused. What? Fine. Why? His jaw twitched. Why are you asking about my mother? Meredith shrugged. No reason, only that I hear things, Hank. I kept your mother's books one winter, before I came out to the ranch. You'd be amazed what an old ledger remembers. She studied her nails. For instance, a bolt of cloth that came through Bozeman 6 years back, bought cheap off a traveling peddler by a certain seamstress, stolen goods as it turned out. Half this county wore that cloth to church. Hank's face went very still. She paid the dry goods store every cent when she learned of it, Meredith went on pleasantly. Quietly, though, so quietly there's not a scrap of paper to show it. The ledger only remembers the buying, Hank, not the putting right. Imagine the sheriff hearing that story now. No proof of the paying back, and a whole town wearing the evidence. It isn't the truth that ruins a woman in a small town. It's the asking. Hank was angrier than he had ever been in his entire life. You know good and well that my mother is one of the most honest, hard-working people to ever grace the streets of Maple Hill. Meredith shrugged. Perhaps, but you never really know people, do you, Hank? He stared at her in disbelief. But, she said, looking thoughtful, I suppose I could be convinced not to say anything about what I saw. You know you didn't see anything. Let me guess. You will keep your lie a secret if I keep the truth from Joshua? Am I right? Meredith shrugged. Something like that. Hank stared at her, hardly daring to believe the situation in which he found himself. Should he tell Joshua the truth and compromise his mother's reputation? Or should he keep quiet and watch Joshua continue to push away the woman he loved because of a lie? Chapter 12. Bella sat in the chair by her window, watching as Hank and Meredith seemed to be in a dispute of sorts. This week had proved worse than living at her aunt's house. Not only was Joshua not speaking to her, she was trying to figure out what to do with her newfound recollections. She watched Hank and Meredith a little longer. Hank looked furious. It wasn't like him to be so mad. He had always seemed pretty even-tempered. Watching this exchange fueled suspicions within her. She couldn't prove it, but she suspected that Meredith was behind her being blamed for the fire. Meredith had looked awfully smug all week, and it was no secret that Meredith didn't like her. In fact, it had become clear to Bella that Meredith was in love with Joshua. No wonder she hated Bella. Bella hugged her knees to her chest and watched Meredith walk away from Hank, looking victorious. Hank stared after her, looking as if he had been kicked in the gut. Joshua sat in his kitchen, staring at the fire. The morning was cool, and he was slow to get started with his chores. He felt silly taking time to grieve over a horse, but that horse had seemed to understand him better than most people he knew. Now that Mackie was gone, he felt a little lost. And if he was honest with himself, he knew that was not the only reason for his grieving. He loved Bella. He adored her. His heart felt heavy at her, perhaps not being all she seemed. Had she really started the fire? It made sense that she had, and yet it also did not. Hank didn't seem to believe that she was responsible, but Meredith was convinced. And why would she lie? Twice in these past days, Hank had come to him looking like a man with a stone caught in his boot. About that fire, he had begun, the second time turning his hat in his hands. If a fella knew a thing, but the telling of it would bring harm down on somebody innocent. There he had stopped, studied his boots, and finished lamely. Never mind, boss. It wasn't anything. Joshua had been too raw to press him. He wished now that he had. He turned to see Meredith heading for the house and sighed inwardly. She was proving exhausting to be around and seemed to always be underfoot lately. He shook his head and headed into his bedroom to avoid her. He simply wasn't in the mood. Inside his bedroom, he noticed that his dresser drawer was partially open. He looked at it curiously. No one should have been in here today. He opened it to find his money pouch moved. He rifled through it to find most of the money missing. He counted it 3 times, confused as to who could have taken it. He began to dig through the drawer, looking for the case of keepsakes from his parents. He found it, but it had also been moved, and the locket his mother had always worn was missing. All but frantic, he rummaged through his drawer, disturbing his socks and shirts. It wasn't there. The money and the locket were both missing. He went to the kitchen to find Meredith at once. "Meredith, were you in my room today doing any cleaning?" She looked at him innocently. "No, I don't believe so. Bella did come up to the house today. She said you had asked her to get something for you." Joshua hadn't talked to Bella in days. Joshua thanked her and went to find Bella. Bella was tidying up her bed when she heard a knock on her door. She opened it, surprised and happy to see Joshua. "Joshua, I was hoping to speak to you. Come in." Joshua pushed in and began pacing the floor. "Bella, I have to ask you, why were you at the house today? Meredith said you told her you were getting something for me, but I know I didn't send you for anything. What is going on?" Bella looked at him, confused. "I haven't been to the house in days, Joshua, not since the last time we talked." "So you are saying Meredith is lying to me?" "That is actually what I wanted to talk to you about." She noticed Joshua looking over her shoulder at her desk and followed his gaze. "What is it, Joshua?" He slowly walked to her desk and picked up a locket partially hidden under a piece of paper. "Where did you get this?" He looked at her, with pain and confusion in his eyes. Bella stared at it incredulously. Joshua, I have never seen that locket in my life. I want to believe that. His voice came out low and ragged. You cannot know how much I want to believe that. His hands were not steady, and Bella took a step back. He lowered his voice. Where is the money, Bella? Did you take that too? His voice indicated his feelings of betrayal. I am telling you the truth. Why won't you believe me? She was becoming angry. I love you, Bella. Can't you see that? I would have given you the world. So help me understand this. Help me make it fit, because I have been trying all week, and I cannot. Bella started to cry. Why won't you believe me? Why do you insist that I'm lying to you? I was not in your barn on the night of the fire. I've never seen that locket in my life, and I sure as rain did not steal money from you. Her voice rose with every sentence until she was yelling. Bella, I don't know what to believe. Do you understand me? My mother's locket is on your desk and my money is gone, and I don't know what to believe. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. You tell me you are telling the truth. I hear you, but your story doesn't line up with the facts in that room. With facts, or with what Meredith is telling you? She asked him, her eyes flashing with indignation. He looked at her, not sure what to think. Someone was lying to him. He had to find out who. I'm going to need a few days, Fahai, Bella, to think about this. I have enjoyed the time we have spent together. I've never felt the way I do when I'm with you. But how can I deny what's going on around me? Are you telling me this is all Meredith's doing? I am telling you to at least talk to her, Joshua, before jumping to conclusions, Bella said softly. That's fair, Bella. I'm sorry. This week has been... Bella teared up. I know, Joshua, I know. The torment in his eyes pained her, and she decided then and there on what she had to do. She couldn't stand to see Joshua like this any longer. She awoke early the next morning, took what money she had left, and went in search of Hank, who was just getting started on the barn. Hank, I need you to drive me to the train station. Please don't ask why. Please don't make me relive one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Just trust me that it needs to be done. Hank nodded, because for a moment he could not trust himself to speak. He wanted to tell her everything, right there in the cold morning yard. The lamp, Meredith, the whole rotten shape of it. But the telling had a price, and the price was his mother's name, and Meredith had made certain he knew it. He could hand Bella the truth and gamble Laura's whole life on how a small town chooses to hear an old story. Or he could hold his tongue and watch an innocent woman climb onto a train. Bella had asked him for one thing, not for answers, not for rescue, to trust her decision and drive the wagon. It was the only thing she had asked of anyone in this whole sorry business, and it was the only thing he had left that was his to give. He gave it, and he hated himself the whole way to town. He dropped her at the station, tipped his hat to her, and watched her buy her ticket and board the train. What an odd month it had been. He took the long way back to the ranch, thinking about mail-order brides, jilted maids, and barns that refused to rebuild themselves. Joshua did not sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table where he had once spread 5 forged letters, and he did what he knew how to do. All his life he had made his decisions the way he made them, about cattle and weather and feed, by setting the facts in a row and looking at them until they confessed. So he set them in a row. Fact 1. The locket had been lying on Bella's desk, half under a sheet of paper, in plain sight of the door. He had stolen nothing in his life, but he had hidden things. Every man has, and no one on this earth hides a stolen treasure by displaying it on their writing desk. A thief buries. A thief tucks a locket deep in a stocking, under a floorboard, into a coat lining. Whoever set that locket on the desk had wanted it found, and found fast. Fact 2. Meredith said Bella had come to the house that day, claiming an errand for him. But Bella did not know where he kept his money. She had never once been in his bedroom, had no reason on earth to know which drawer, which pouch, which box of keepsakes. Whoever went through that dresser had gone straight to the right drawer. Only one person alive cleaned that room every week. Fact 3. Her hands. He had carried her off the yard himself the night of the fire, and her palms had been seared in 2 straight lines, the mark of a hot iron latch gripped with both hands. Too sick with grief, he had not read that mark then. He read it now. The latch stood on the outside of the stable door. A person who sets a fire inside a barn does not afterward stand in the open yard fighting to haul that door open against a wall of smoke. The burns were not the mark of the crime. They were the mark of a rescue that failed. And fact 4, which was not a fact about doors or drawers at all. 2 people had told him stories these 3 weeks. One of them had wept and raged and left him rather than stand accused another day. The other had watched the whole calamity with folded hands and helpful suggestions and had never once, he realized, seemed surprised by any of it. The row of facts sat there in the lamplight, confessing. He thought of the shirt, cut clean before it was torn. Cut with what? He had never owned shears. The kitchen did. He thought of the seeds, the sugar, the gate that Bella swore she latched. He thought of Hank, these past days, starting sentences and swallowing them, a man with a stone in his boot too big to walk on and too awkward to name. By first light, Joshua Miller knew which woman had lied to him. He knew it the way he knew weather, in his bones first and his head second, and this time the 2 of them agreed. He crossed the yard at sunup to tell Bella so, rehearsing the words, none of them good enough. Her cabin door stood open. The bed was made, army neat, the way a servant leaves a room she does not expect to see again. The desk was bare. Bella was gone. Chapter 13. He arrived back at the ranch and was unhitching the horses when he found a neatly folded page bearing Joshua's name on the seat on which Bella had sat. So she had written him a note. He sighed and took it straight to the house where he found Joshua drinking coffee. There is no easy way to say it, Joshua. Bella asked me to drive her to the train station this morning. Her train left about an hour ago. He sighed. She left this for you. Joshua took the paper from Hank and opened it carefully. Hank wanted to give him space to read the note in private, so he mumbled something about the barn and horses and left Joshua alone in the kitchen. Joshua thanked him and began to read. Dear Joshua, it pains me to write this letter, but I believe this is for the best. I have decided to go back to my aunt and uncles to see if they will take me in again. I cannot continue to stay in a place where I am not trusted and continually accused of things I didn't do. I want you to know that I have never stolen anything from you, nor was I anywhere near the barn on the night of the fire. I imagine there are other stories that you have been told about me, which I cannot even refute because I do not know about them. I do know, however, who told them. Now that I have nothing to lose, I feel I can be completely honest. Meredith has been cruel to me since I arrived. She does not like me, and hasn't since the day I met her at the train station. I beg of you, for your own protection, speak with Meredith. It is too late for you and me, but you should know the truth about a woman who is working under your roof. I pray she will tell you the truth about everything. Thank you for the time we had. I will never forget you, Joshua. Love always, Bella. Joshua wasted no time walking to Meredith's cabin, where he knocked on her door. She opened it immediately. Joshua, what a pleasant surprise. I was just getting ready to come up to the house. Meredith, we need to talk, and I need the truth. Sure, Joshua, come on in. No, let's stay outside. I need the air. He removed his hat. What do you know about the fire? Did you really see Bella in the barn that night? She looked at him, not sure how much he already knew. Would Hank have gone against their agreement? Joshua saw her hesitation, and the last of his doubt went out like a lamp. His long night of facts had already told him the truth. Her face was telling him again. Meredith, the truth. She raised her chin indignantly. I had to do something, Joshua. You were falling for a woman you barely knew. She was only going to break your heart. Can't you see? You and I belong together. She was ruining that. Joshua narrowed his eyes. What? I love you, Joshua, for you and me to be together. Bella had to go. I had to get rid of her somehow. My subtle hints weren't working, so I had to do something more rash. But it worked. I saw Hank leave with her this morning and come back without her. So now we can be together. I did it for us, Joshua. She seemed to be waiting for a proposal. Joshua was so shocked he could only stare at her. You started the fire? You killed my horse? And you blamed Bella? Something in Meredith's composure cracked then, all at once, like ice over a spring creek. The The fire was never meant to touch the stable. The words came out of her in a rush, high and shaking. It was a lamp in the straw by the yard door. A little fire, a smoky, frightening little fire meant to be found inside of 10 minutes, with her shawl left beside it. It was only ever meant to point at her, to make you send her away. Her hands had begun to tremble. But the wind came up off the ravine. It went into the loft like a living thing. Prosody. By the time I turned at the top of the hill, it was in the roof, and her voice came apart entirely. I heard the horse, Joshua. I hear that horse every night. Joshua suddenly recalled Bella's shock at seeing the locket was on her desk. Did you take my mother's locket and plant it in Bella's room? And the money? Yes. The defiance had gone out of her. What was left was smaller and harder to look at. You were still wavering. Even after the fire, you were going to choose her. I could see it. So I took the locket. I needed something you couldn't forgive. She looked up at him then and made her last try. But don't you see, it only worked because she doesn't belong here. I do. I've kept your house 3 years, Joshua. Nobody will ever tend to you the way. Joshua felt sick to his stomach. Get out, Joshua said through clenched teeth. Meredith stepped back and looked at him, confused. What? Get out. He said it louder this time. I don't want to see you anywhere near this ranch again. Do you understand? But Joshua, I said leave, Meredith, now. He turned on his heel and headed to the barn. He had to get to the train station before the last train left. Meredith was on the eastbound train before noon the following day. Where she went, this story does not follow. Some fires burn out in a night. The kind that people set alight inside themselves take longer. Hank walked in while he was saddling his horse. I need you to take care of things for me while I'm gone. I am headed to New York. Hank stared at him. You're going after her? I just found out that Meredith has been lying about everything. Bella did nothing wrong, and now I may have lost her. He turned to look at Hank. Why didn't you bring her to me when you found out she wanted to leave? Hank looked down and rubbed the back of his neck. Joshua, Joshua stopped and narrowed his eyes at him. You knew about Meredith, and you didn't tell me. Hank's eyes filled with tears, and he blinked them back. How could you do this to me? Joshua was hurt and angry. Hank took a minute to speak. She threatened my mother. There's an old story from years back about a bolt of stolen cloth that Ma bought honest off a peddler. She paid the store for it twice over when she learned what it was, but there's no paper that proves her side. Meredith knew the story from keeping Ma's books. She'd have told it crooked, to the sheriff, to the whole town. You know that shop is everything to her. He ran his fingers through his hair. I didn't know what to do, he mumbled. I'm so sorry, Joshua. Hank's eyes were heavy with regret. Joshua put his hand on Hank's shoulder. You were put in an impossible situation, Hank? Hank stood up straight, his regret turning to resolve. Go get her, Joshua. Go get her and bring her home with you, where she belongs. The two men hugged briefly. Joshua finished saddling his horse and took off. Hank watched him ride off toward town. I hope he finds her, he said into the crisp air, or I might never forgive myself. Bella arrived in New York, tired and heartbroken. She stood in front of the house she had left a month before. She never dreamed she would be back so soon. But life had a way of sending Bella over the rainbow and back again. She sighed and walked up to the house. Her Aunt Sarah met her at the door. Well, look what the cat dragged in. What are you doing here? Things didn't exactly work out as I had planned. I was wondering if I could live and work here until I figure out what exactly to do. Sarah looked her up and down as if she had fleas. We sold you to that rancher fair and square. I told Jacob this might happen. I can't say I'm surprised he sent you back, but we have no use for you here. You're his problem now. And with that, she slammed the door in her face. Bella stared at the closed door and her heart sank in her chest. Sold. Fair and square. So there had been a price after all, and everyone had known it but her. She thought of Joshua at the ravine, hat in his hands, telling her he had never known what the brokers were, and she had believed him. She believed him still. But another thing he had said at the ravine kept circling back. Staying is your choice, he had told her. Yours alone. And then a shirt had torn, and a barn had burned, and a burned latch had outweighed her word, and the choice had somehow gone to trial without her. For one terrible moment, she felt 5 years old again. A thing passed from hand to hand. So that was what Jacob and Sarah had always thought her to be, a trifle to be sold and bought and given away. They were wrong. There were people in Montana who could have told them how wrong. But knowing a thing and feeling it are different countries, and just now, on this street, in front of this door, the feeling was winning. She was finding it hard to breathe. She turned around, tears streaming down her face, and ran straight into her uncle. "Bella, what are you doing here?" She was shocked to see him before her. She had thought a lot about what she would say to him about the night of the fire if she saw him again, but now that he was standing in front of her, the speech she had prepared seemed ridiculous. "You were there," she said through her tears. "You were there the night of the fire, and you left us. You left my parents to die, brought me here to make me a servant, and then sold me as if I was a piece of property. How could you? What kind of man does these things?" She was crying harder now, almost unable to speak. "Bella, I am so sorry. That night, I was scared, and the sale, I assumed it would be all right. Here, take this. It's all I have." He handed her a wad of money, which she fought the urge to throw back at him. She knew that without it, she would have nowhere to stay for the night. She took the money and looked at him one last time before heading for the street. Jacob looked after her, with a hint of regret playing on his face. Joshua looked at the address written on the piece of paper in his hand as the train careened through the country. "What have I done?" he thought. A man seated across the aisle spoke up. "You look a little down in the mouth. Everything okay?" "Oh, just thinking through my regrets, that's all," replied Joshua through a forced smile. The man laughed. "I suppose that's a pastime in which we have all indulged a time or two. I am a doctor back in New York. Name's Nathan. Nathan Hall." He extended his hand across the aisle. Joshua shook his hand firmly. "Joshua Miller. I'm a rancher from Montana. Only a couple of things bring a man from Montana to New York on the late train. Business or a woman? Which is it?" "If you don't mind my prying." Joshua smiled at him. "Not at all. It's a woman. I had her, and now I'm afraid I've lost her." "Ah, so that's the regret which plagues you," Nate said. "Want to talk about it?" Joshua sighed. "Not much to tell, unfortunately. I didn't believe her when I had the chance, and now she's gone." Dr. Hall nodded. "I lost a woman once. I lost her to influenza, though. Being a doctor, you would think I could have saved her." His eyes clouded over. "But I couldn't." He looked at Joshua. "That's my regret, young man. The inability to save the one I loved. If all you have to do to save yours is cross the country and hunt her down in New York, I say you go for it. And don't stop until you have her." Joshua's heart went out to the stranger. "I will do that, Dr. Hall." He sat back and thought about his behavior, regretting almost every decision he had made over the last week. He had failed to listen to his instincts, listening instead to what seemed rational. This wasn't the first time he had made this mistake. Being level-headed and straightforward was good for ranching, but it had failed him in love. He stared out the window and willed the train to go faster. Chapter 14. Bella showed up at the inn and paid for one night's stay and dinner, using all the money her uncle had given her. She had no money and no prospects. She was truly alone. She ate dinner alone, trying to decide what to do next. A girl orphaned had become a woman sold and abandoned. She could not quite comprehend her own plight. It seemed like a nightmare, and she wished someone would wake her. Joshua stood outside the inn, looking at the address and comparing it to the one in his hand. A man wearing a badge and a uniform was passing by when he saw Joshua standing outside the inn, looking confused. He stopped. "Help you, sir?" he asked. Joshua looked over at him. "Yes, I rather fear I may be lost." "You wouldn't be the first, sir. Can I help you find where you're going?" "I did some business with a couple of men a few months ago. This is the address they gave me." He handed the paper over to the officer who studied it. "This is the right address, all right, but neither one of those men owns this place. Mr. Roger Lancaster owns it and has since I've been working in this area. No, whatever men you did business with are long gone." Joshua looked defeated. "Thank you for your help." You look tired, mister. The officer nodded at the door to the inn. Go on in anyway and get yourself some breakfast. The best biscuits around, if you ask me. Ask for Roger. He is a good man, and if your business fella's left any way to be found, Roger will know about it. Maybe he can help you out. Joshua smiled at him. Thank you. I think I'll do that. He proceeded inside to the reception desk and asked for Mr. Roger Lancaster, who was found and brought out promptly. He was a man of medium build with kind eyes. He was wearing a suit. How may I be of service? He asked Joshua. I am looking for these two men. I did some business with them a few months ago and was hoping you could help me with some information I need. Mr. Lancaster looked at the names. Ah, yes, they stay here often. They are not in town presently. If you would like to leave a note, I can make sure they get it when they pass through again. Joshua sighed. I will do that. Mr. Lancaster handed him a page and a pencil and cleared his throat. If I may offer some advice, sir? Of course. Joshua looked at him quizzically. These men. Finish your business dealings with them, and then find different men with whom to work. I do not know the nature of your business or what your affiliation with them entails, but I do not believe them to be on the up and up, so to speak. Joshua paused in his writing. Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. I will definitely take that to heart. Joshua wrote his note, concerned about the nature of those he had paid to produce Bella. Joshua handed the note to the innkeeper and turned to leave, colliding with a person as he did so. He began to apologize and then stopped mid-sentence. He was looking right into the eyes of Bella Brown. Bella's breath caught. Sarah's words were still ringing in her ears, and the deeper wound beneath them ached as it had ached since the fire. She stood in that inn, looking into the eyes of the man she had every right to be angry with. Hate him, though. She had tried that the whole way east. It would not take. She pulled herself up to her full 5 feet 4 inches, barely reaching his chest, and willed herself not to cry. What are you doing here, Joshua? He looked at her earnestly. I came here for you. I came to find you. In this big city, I didn't know if I would be able to track you down, and here you are, more beautiful than I remember. He reached out to touch her hair, and she backed away. Don't touch me. Lancaster walked around the desk and addressed them quietly. I see you are upset, ma'am. Would you two like a more private setting in which to have a discussion? Bella recognized his intention to protect her and was also not desirous of an altercation in his lobby. That would be excellent, thank you, sir. Her eyes told him she was not afraid of Joshua and that they would be happy to take their disagreement elsewhere. Mr. Lancaster looked relieved. Right through here. He motioned for them to follow him into a small business office that was frequently used by regular guests. He retreated and left the door open. Joshua turned to Bella, and the hurt stood plain in his eyes. Bella, I am so sorry. I am sorry about Meredith, about the fire, about all her lies. I read your note and spoke with her. You were right. You were right about everything, and I was a fool for not believing you. Can you ever forgive me? I saw my aunt and uncle, was her reply. Joshua stiffened at the mention of them. He knew they weren't kind to Bella and hated that she had succumbed to seeing them again. Aunt Sarah had news for me. We sold you to that rancher, she said, fair and square. Bella's voice was steady, the way a rope is steady when it is drawn too tight. I stood on her step and had no answer for her, Joshua, because what would I say? That I was not sold? I was. We both know I was. Bella, you told me at the ravine that you never knew. I believed you then. I believe you now. Her chin came up. So Sarah is not the wound, Joshua. You are. You said that staying was my choice, mine alone. You said you would not hold me to a bargain, 2 liars struck in my name, and then a shirt tore, and a barn burned, and a locket appeared on my desk, and you weighed my word against Meredith's stories and a burned-up latch, and my word lost. Her eyes were bright now, and she let them be. I stood in front of you with my hands wrapped in linen, telling you the truth, and you asked for a few days to decide what I was. You cannot hand a woman her choice with one hand and take her word away with the other. So tell me, which am I? The woman you believed at the ravine, or the one you could not believe across your own kitchen? Joshua stood and took it, the way he would stand and take weather. Every word landed. Every word was fair. The woman at the ravine, he said quietly. Bella, it was never you I doubted. It was my own judgment. It had been wrong about the letters, wrong about Meredith, wrong about everything I was most sure of. And a man who has been fooled like that starts checking his own eyes. But I checked them against the wrong things. I set a latch and a locket above the truest person I have ever known, and I will be sorry for it as long as I live. He did not reach for her this time. He kept his hat in his hands. I won't ask you to forget it. I'll ask for what you asked of me at the ravine. Time to make my case. 3 weeks or 3 years, whatever it takes. Let me earn it back the slow way. The silence stood between them like a third person in the little office. And Sarah? Bella said at last, quieter. Fair and square, she said. She said it smiling. Your aunt sells lies the way the brothers sold letters. Anger came into his face then, the clean and useful kind. Let's go see them, he said resolutely. You have had every truth of your life handed to you secondhand and crooked. This one you will hear plainly from your uncle's own mouth, with me standing beside you. I thought I had lost you when you left the ranch. Now that I've found you, I can't let you get away again. But whatever you decide after tonight, Bella, no one will ever again decide for you. She looked into his eyes and saw an intensity she had never seen before. She nodded. Fine, Joshua, we'll talk to them. Joshua stood in front of Bella and knocked on the door. Jacob answered the door this time, and he failed to notice Bella at first. Can I help you? He looked Joshua up and down. He was afraid he was there to collect on a recent bet he had made. My name is Joshua Miller, and we need to talk. Jacob's eyebrows shot up, and then he noticed Bella behind him. I thought you sent her back? He eyed Bella curiously. I said we need to talk, Mr. Brown. Joshua was firm. Talk, Jacob invited and stepped out onto the portico, crossing his arms. You're going to tell Bella the whole truth of what was done to her. Who arranged it, who took money, and how much. What I knew, and what I never knew. All of it, plainly in front of her. She has spent 14 years being handed lies in this house. That ends on this step. Jacob's eyes flinched. Well, of course you bought her. He laughed nervously. Joshua glared at him, and Bella's eyes filled with tears. Sarah joined them outside the door. What's going on here? What is she doing back? She turned to Bella. I told you to leave and never come back. We don't want you. Then she addressed Joshua. Listen, mister, I told her we can't take her back. I get why you don't want her anymore, but we just can't have her. She is too darned expensive. She crossed her arms. Bella listened, feeling for all the world like a head of livestock. She stood between her aunt and uncle and Joshua, feeling smaller than she ever had in her life. Joshua raised himself up to his full height, which was a full head taller than Jacob, and stepped closer to him so that their toes were practically touching. Listen, Mr. Brown, I don't know what your aim is here, but you know the truth of what was done, every crooked step of it. Say it plainly, in front of her, or you will wish you had never met me. Am I making myself clear? Jacob cleared his throat and looked at Sarah, who frowned at him. He looked at Bella and pitied her. His shoulders slumped. Miller paid the brothers to arrange a match. That is all he ever paid for. They took their fee out of his money, and they paid me and Sarah out of their own pockets for you, and they never told him one word of it. He believed you had agreed to the whole thing, Bella. Yes, I sold you. But the man standing beside you never bought anyone. Bella took a ragged breath as tears began to roll down her face. Sarah took a closer look at Joshua. You just came into town on a train last minute to fetch Bella, and I imagine you are going to have to stay at the inn, buy food. Yet you paid all that money for the convenience of having someone manage getting you a bride? She looked him up and down. Seems to me you have more money than sense, and plenty of it to go around. Jacob and I have suffered long enough, taking care of this one most of her life. She nodded her head at Bella. I say it's time you shared what you have. If we are to be family, it only makes sense. We took care of Bella, now you help us out. Bella stepped in front of her aunt, all fear diminished. We are not, nor have we ever been, family. Joshua led Bella off the doorstep. Halfway down the stairs, Sarah shouted after them. Selfish. That's what you are, Joshua Miller. Selfish. Joshua turned to look at her with disgust. Don't ever try and contact either one of us ever again. And for the love of all that is good in this world, Don't talk of selfishness. The hypocrisy is mind-numbing. Joshua and Bella walked away, and they never saw Jacob or Sarah Brown again. Chapter 15. They walked a long while without speaking, through streets Bella had crossed 1,000 times as somebody's servant and never once as herself. "There is one thing more I want from this city," she said at last, "before we leave it for good." "Name it." "The truth. All of it." She stopped walking and faced him. "My father had a business, Joshua, a house with silver on the table. I was 5 years old, and then I was a servant in a made-over dress, and no one ever told me what happened in between. My aunt spoke of an inheritance once, when she thought I couldn't hear. I want to know what was mine. Not to have it, to know it." So the next morning they climbed a narrow stair off Pearl Street to a door with a brass plate gone green with age. Abernathy, attorney at law. The man behind the desk was old and dry as his ledgers, but when Bella gave her name, he rose slowly out of his chair. "Miss Brown," he said, "you have your mother's eyes." He polished his spectacles, put them on, and looked again. "I drew your father's papers for 11 years. I wondered if this day would come." What the ledgers told took most of the morning, and none of it was kind. The haberdashery, her father's pride, sold within 18 months of the fire to a competitor for a third of its worth. The house lot sold after it, and year upon year, in a guardian's careful right, the entries marched down the page, drawn for the child's keep, drawn for the child's schooling, drawn for the child's clothing. Bella, who had slept in an attic, schooled herself out of her father's surviving books and worn her cousin's cast-offs for 14 years, read the entries twice, and then laughed. It was a small, terrible sound, and Joshua's hand closed over hers. "Could it be recovered?" he asked. "Some part, perhaps. Misapplied trust funds, a court might agree. It would take years, and lawyers, and money, and Jacob Brown has none of the last for the winning." The old man took off his spectacles. "There is, however, one matter your uncle could never touch." He drew out a thin folder, and from it a single page. "Your mother's legacy. Her own mother left it to her, and your father, a careful man, kept it in trust at the Merchant's Bank in Emily's name alone. A guardian may not touch such a principal. It has sat these 14 years, gathering interest like dust. A little over $500, Miss Brown, payable to Emily's daughter at 1 in 20, or upon her marriage." His dry eyes flicked from Bella to Joshua and back, missing nothing. Whichever should come first. Joshua developed a sudden deep interest in the crown of his hat. "As to the rest," Abernathy said, "say the word, and I will pursue your uncle to the last dollar of it. I would do it gladly. I did not care for how he answered my letters in the years after the fire, and I care less now." Bella rose and went to the little window. Below, the city went about its business, carts and barrows and hurrying strangers, the whole gray machine that had swallowed her childhood. "No," she said. "Miss Brown, my uncle has decided every year of my life since I was 5, the house I lived in, the work I did, the hour I woke, the train I boarded." She turned around. "If I spend the years ahead suing him, those years are his too. He has decided his last day of my life, Mr. Abernathy. Let him keep whatever is left. It will leave him soon enough on its own." The old attorney looked at her for a long moment. Then he bowed his head, the way men of his generation did before something they respected. "Your father," he said, "argued exactly that way. I never won against him either." The papers for the trust were drawn up within the hour, to be paid over upon her marriage. If the attorney smiled into his inkwell while the two of them studiously avoided each other's eyes, he was too much a professional to be caught at it. On the street, Bella stood still and breathed, and it seemed to her the air had changed. What was stolen from her had never chiefly been money. It was the knowing. A person can carry an empty pocket lightly. It is the unanswered questions that weigh. She walked back toward the inn, with 14 years of questions answered, and her step was so light that Joshua, keeping pace, felt he was escorting a woman he had just that hour met. There was one errand left. At the inn, Joshua asked Mr. Lancaster to send for the officer who walked that street, and the man came in at the end of his beat, helmet under his arm. Joshua laid it all out on the little office desk. 5 letters in a false hand, tied with string, the printed advertisement. the address the brothers had given him in Paul's writing for comparison. The officer bent over the letters a long while. Forgery, he said at last. False pretenses, and the selling of the girl on top of it. He straightened up. You are not the first, sir, I am sorry to say. There was a young woman sent out to Wyoming in the fall, same fashion, and complaints filed in Albany besides. What there has never been is paper. He gathered the letters with a kind of reverence. This is paper. They stay here when they pass through, Mr. Lancaster said quietly. The next time they do, there will be men here who are eager to make their acquaintance. Joshua shook both their hands. It was not the ending he would have chosen, a slow trap set with string and paper. He was a man who preferred his justice the size of a fist. But he was learning this trip, that the patient kind reached further. The morning after Joshua and Bella took the westbound train, a man in a once fine coat presented himself at the desk of the inn and asked for the Calmid brothers. Not in town, said Mr. Lancaster pleasantly. May I say who inquired? They owe me money. The man's hands were unsteady, and his eyes had the particular hunted look of a debtor doing arithmetic he cannot make come out. The balance of a business arrangement. They said when it was finished, it's finished, and they've paid me nothing, and I... He caught himself, straightened his collar, and assembled the ruins of his dignity. Jacob Brown. They know the name. I don't doubt it, said Mr. Lancaster. He watched the man walk out into the cold. Then he opened the back page of his register and wrote the name down. Roger Lancaster had built a good life on noticing people, and something about this one asked to be remembered. Some debts the law collects. Others, life collects in its own time, at its own strange rate of interest. Both collections were already underway, though none of the parties knew it yet. Joshua and Bella arrived at the ranch a little ragged, but happier than they had ever been. Once at the house, Joshua stopped her on his front porch. Bella, before we go any further, I have to do something I should have done long ago. He dropped down on one knee. Bella Brown, I know I'm not perfect. I am not great with words or with matters of the heart. I don't pretend to be someone I'm not. Truth be told, I may be a better rancher than I am a husband. His voice grew grave as he blinked back tears. But I can promise you that no one will ever love you the way I love you. No one will work harder to ensure your happiness than I will. Bella, will you marry me? Bella dropped down to face him. Yes, she said through tears. 1,000,000 times yes. They embraced as the sun dropped behind the trees. They rode into town the next morning to speak to Hank's mother, Laura, about a dress. Bella assured him that she had a dress in which to get married, but he wouldn't hear of it. For all of his level-headedness, expense seemed to be a non-issue where Bella was concerned. They arrived at the pincushion, where Laura was already waiting outside. She was waving at them as they pulled in. Bella laughed. How did she know we were coming? I'm guessing Hank had something to do with that. He tethered the horses and lifted Laura up into a hug, even as he spun her around. She laughed like a schoolgirl. Put me down before you kill me. They all laughed, and Joshua set her down gently. Okay, Bella, let's get to work. When is the wedding? How much time do we have? We were thinking next week, Joshua admitted. I am going to go talk to the preacher now to set things up. Laura threw her hands in the air and hustled Bella inside. Oh, glory be, we have got work to do. Your future husband here seems to think I'm a miracle worker, she said in a way that made it clear she was pleased to be considered such. Bella and Laura looked through fabric and talked of shape and size and fit. Laura was like a child in a candy store, and Bella felt like a real princess. It's odd that, when an orphan becomes a princess, it is assumed to only happen in storybooks. When the fairy tale becomes a reality, the feeling is surreal. Joshua walked in as she was laughing with Laura, and the sound was contagious. What are you schoolgirls giggling about? Joshua laughed as he walked into the shop. Oh, nothing you men would understand. Laura waved him off. Okay, Bella, I think we have it. You will be the prettiest bride in Montana by the time I'm done with you. Oh, I have no doubt about that, Joshua said as he winked at Bella. She blushed, and Laura beamed with pleasure. Laura shooed them out the door. Now, you two go on. I have work to do and only a week to do it. Bella hugged her tightly before she left. Thank you, Laura. Her eyes filled with tears, for the meaning of these words encompassed more than she could say. How do you thank someone for making you feel like family? Laura seemed to understand and squeezed her back. Now go, so I can work. Joshua and Bella left, arm in arm, with Laura waving them on. Chapter 16. On the way home, they stopped by the ravine and stared out over what seemed to be the edge of the earth. Remember when you brought me here and told me about Mackie? Bella looked up at him. How could I forget? That was the day I knew I wanted to marry you. He held her hand and she blushed. Do you miss him? Bella asked. Who, Mackie? She nodded. Oh, I do miss him. In a way, the horse was the only family I had, next to Hank and Laura. He looked down at her and smiled and shrugged. I suppose that's silly. She shook her head vehemently. It's not silly at all. I was devastated for you when Mackie was killed. I watched you mourn, and it broke my heart. He felt, in that moment, as if all that had happened in the last month was somehow a dream, a beautiful nightmare which turned from sunrise to night and back again. Do you ever wonder where your life is taking you? He asked. She thought for a minute. No, I don't. I decided long ago that wondering about the future wasn't for me. She shrugged. Each day was different, yet the same as the one before. Each step is a step in the right direction, as long as you're walking. And when I found out I was coming here, I figured a train ride out west had to be a step in the right direction, even if I didn't know what was waiting for me on the other side. Did you still think you were moving in the right direction when you met Meredith? Joshua teased. Bella laughed. Well, I have to admit that did concern me a little. Joshua turned to face her. You are a woman unlike any I have ever met. Anyone else would have run for the hills when they met Meredith at the train station, and if not then, there were 100 more opportunities to walk away. Even when you did decide to leave, you were quick to forgive. Bella grabbed his hands. When life brings you to a ranch and hands you the man of your dreams, you don't just throw it away because of a jilted maid. I hope you like me, Joshua Miller, because I'm not going anywhere. Ever. He touched her face. Like you? Oh, I do like you, Bella. But more than that, I love you. And the day you become Mrs. Joshua Miller will be the happiest day of my life. 2 days before the wedding, a buggy came up the ranch road at a pace its horse plainly considered showing off, and a girl in a purple dress stood up in it and waved with both arms. Polly! Bella was off the porch and across the yard before the buggy had properly stopped. The two of them hugged and laughed and talked over the top of each other, in the manner of friends who have put everything in letters and now must say it all again out loud. That way takes longer. It is also better. Polly had driven over from her aunt's 2 valleys east the moment Bella's letter arrived. She was staying through the summer. She would not have missed the wedding for the world, or as she put it, for 2 worlds and a hat. It was Hank who came to see to the buggy horse. Polly, this is Hank, said Bella. Hank, my friend Polly from the train. The one who laughs at calves, said Polly with terrible delight. Hank, who had faced down blizzards and Meredith, looked at the girl in the purple dress and forgot what he generally did with his hands. Only the one calf, miss, he managed. Mostly they laugh at me. He led the horse away with great dignity and missed the corral gate latch twice, a thing he had not done since he was 9 years old. Polly watched him go with her head tipped to one side, like a bird considering something. Well, she said. Polly? I said, well, it's a common word. People say it all the time. But she was smiling as she said it. At supper that evening, she asked Hank a great many questions about cattle, a subject in which she had shown no previous interest of any kind. When she drove away the next day, Hank stood looking after the buggy a while. She get home all right, you think? He asked of nobody. It's 9 miles, Hank, said Joshua. Roads, though, said Hank darkly, and went back to his work and hit his thumb with a hammer twice before noon. On the eve of the wedding, Laura came out to the ranch with the finished dress laid across her lap like something asleep. They hung it on the wardrobe door in the little cabin, and the 2 women stood back and looked at it in the lamplight. It was simple, the way the best things are, white with 100 small tucks that had each taken their minute, and every minute of them showed. I sewed my worry right into the seams, Laura said. It's the strongest dress in Montana." Bella touched the sleeve and found she couldn't speak. "Now, none of that, or I'll start, and I've only the one handkerchief." Laura bustled at the hem, needlessly. "Tomorrow you dress here, and I'll come do your hair, and if that Mrs. Pruitt tries to get in with her opinions, I will hold the door personally." "Laura," Bella said it so seriously that the older woman stopped and looked up. "Tomorrow, in the church. Would you sit at the front? Where?" Her voice went thin, and she made herself finish it. "There's a place my mother would have stood to see me married. Nobody can stand in it. But if you were sitting near it, I think I could look at you when I need to look at someone, if you were willing." Laura Cavalier had raised a son alone, buried a husband, and run a business for 20 years among the pins. She put her arms around Bella and held on, and for a long moment the lamp had the only dry eye in the room. "Child," she said at last into Bella's hair, "wild horses. That's all I'll say on it. Wild horses." And no more was said on it, because no more was needed. Bella woke on her wedding morning to a sound she couldn't place, a rhythmic bite and sigh, coming from beyond the garden. She wrapped her shawl over her nightdress and stepped out into a dawn the color of apricots. There, along the east side of the house, where the morning sun would find them first, Joshua Miller stood in the half-dark, digging. 6 slender saplings lay beside the row of holes with their roots bundled in wet sacking, and their thin branches were hazed with the first red-brown of budding leaves. "Cherry trees. You're not to be seeing me today," he said without turning around. "It's bad luck. Go back inside. You're digging in the dark on your wedding morning." "I am. The freight was late. They came in on yesterday's train, all the way from a nursery in Minnesota. A man can't marry a woman he promised cherry trees while her cherry trees sit at a depot." He set the last one in its hole and firmed the earth around it with his boot. "6 of them, one for every pie you threatened me with." Bella came down the steps and stood among the little trees in her shawl. If you had asked her in that moment to trade all 6 for every silver fork in New York, she would have laughed at you. "I have something for you too," she said. "I meant to send it with Hank, but you're here, so." From the pocket of her shawl, she took a folded page and put it in his earth-stained hand. "I've never given anyone a poem before. You'll be the first, and the only, from now on." He unfolded it there between the cherry trees, and read it in the growing light, slowly, the way he read anything that mattered. "Plant me no roses that bloom and are done. Give me the tree that stands to the sun, that bears the long winter, the frost and the snow, and sweetens the summer, slow year by slow, for that is the loving. I'll give and I'll take, the kind that the cold of this world cannot break." Joshua read it twice. Then he folded it with the care a man gives a deed to good land and put it in his breast pocket on the left side. "It'll be in this pocket at the church," he said, "so you'll know." He gathered his spade and went because the sun was coming and the rules are the rules. But at the gate he stopped. "Bella, the line about the frost and the snow." He looked back at her through the young trees. "That's us, isn't it? Both of us." "It's us," she said. He nodded once and walked down toward the barn, and the sun came up over a ranch that had 6 more trees and one less lonely man than it had the spring before. All the townsfolk turned up for the wedding, thanks to Laura. The sun shone down on the little church in Maple Hill, basking the wedding-goers in its light. Bella, of course, was radiant, but the two of them together touched the hearts of everyone in the church that day. A wedding is not a rare event. The wedding of 2 people who have walked through fire to find each other is rarer. Most hearts must do their mending alone. When 2 mend together, the mending becomes a work of art. "Doesn't she look beautiful?" Laura whispered to Hank. "Absolutely," Hank whispered back. "But do you know who made that dress? I think I see a loose thread," Hank teased. "Oh, you stop it." She hit him on his leg, and he pretended to be hurt. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." The preacher smiled at them. They turned toward each other, and Joshua kissed her and hugged her gently. "Will you plant me those trees now, dear husband?" she whispered into his ear. He laughed out loud before the entire congregation. "I will plant you 1,000 trees, Bella Miller," he said. He kissed her again. positive about having been handed the world on a silver platter. Epilogue. On the way home, they stopped by the ravine and stared out over what seemed to be the edge of the earth. "Remember when you brought me here and told me about Mackie?" Bella looked up at him. "How could I forget? That was the day I knew I wanted to marry you." He held her hand, and she blushed. "Do you miss him?" Bella asked. "Who, Mackie?" She nodded. "Oh, I do miss him. In a way, the horse was the only family I had next to Hank and Laura." He looked down at her and smiled and shrugged. "I suppose that's silly." She shook her head vehemently. "It's not silly at all. I was devastated for you when Mackie was killed. I watched you mourn, and it broke my heart." He felt, in that moment, as if all that had happened in the last month was somehow a dream, a beautiful nightmare which turned from sunrise to night and back again. "Do you ever wonder where your life is taking you?" he asked. She thought for a minute. "No, I don't. I decided long ago that wondering about the future wasn't for me." She shrugged. "Each day was different, yet the same as the one before. Each step is a step in the right direction, as long as you're walking. And when I found out I was coming here, I figured a train ride out west had to be a step in the right direction, even if I didn't know what was waiting for me on the other side." "Did you still think you were moving in the right direction when you met Meredith?" Joshua teased. Bella laughed. "Well, I have to admit, that did concern me a little." Joshua turned to face her. "You are a woman unlike any I have ever met. Anyone else would have run for the hills when they met Meredith at the train station, and if not then, there were 100 more opportunities to walk away. Even when you did decide to leave, you were quick to forgive." Bella grabbed his hands. "When life brings you to a ranch and hands you the man of your dreams, you don't just throw it away because of a jilted maid. I hope you like me, Joshua Miller, because I'm not going anywhere. Ever." He touched her face. "Like you? Oh, I do like you, Bella. But more than that, I love you. And the day you become Mrs. Joshua Miller will be the happiest day of my life." 2 days before the wedding, a buggy came up the ranch road at a pace its horse plainly considered showing off, and a girl in a purple dress stood up in it and waved with both arms. "Polly!" Bella was off the porch and across the yard before the buggy had properly stopped. The two of them hugged and laughed and talked over the top of each other, in the manner of friends who have put everything in letters and now must say it all again out loud. That way takes longer. It is also better. Polly had driven over from her aunt's, 2 valleys east, the moment Bella's letter arrived. She was staying through the summer. She would not have missed the wedding for the world, or as she put it, for 2 worlds and a hat. It was Hank who came to see to the buggy horse. "Polly, this is Hank," said Bella. "Hank, my friend Polly from the train." "The one who laughs at calves," said Polly with terrible delight. Hank, who had faced down blizzards and Meredith, looked at the girl in the purple dress and forgot what he generally did with his hands. "Only the one calf, miss," he managed. "Mostly they laugh at me." He led the horse away with great dignity and missed the corral gate latch twice, a thing he had not done since he was 9 years old. Polly watched him go with her head tipped to one side, like a bird considering something. "Well," she said. "Polly?" I said, "Well, it's a common word. People say it all the time." But she was smiling as she said it. At supper that evening, she asked Hank a great many questions about cattle, a subject in which she had shown no previous interest of any kind. When she drove away the next day, Hank stood looking after the buggy a while. "She get home all right, you think?" he asked, of nobody. "It's 9 miles, Hank," said Joshua. "Roads, though," said Hank darkly, and went back to his work and hit his thumb with a hammer twice before noon. On the eve of the wedding, Laura came out to the ranch with the finished dress laid across her lap, like something asleep. They hung it on the wardrobe door in the little cabin, and the 2 women stood back and looked at it in the lamplight. It was simple, the way the best things are, white with 100 small tucks that had each taken their minute, and every minute of them showed. "I sewed my worry right into the seams," Laura said. "It's the strongest dress in Montana." Bella touched the sleeve and found she couldn't speak. "Now, none of that, or I'll start, and I've only the one handkerchief." Laura bustled at the hem, needlessly. Tomorrow you dress here, and I'll come do your hair, and if that Mrs. Pruitt tries to get in with her opinions, I will hold the door personally." "Laura," Bella said it so seriously that the older woman stopped and looked up. "Tomorrow, in the church. Would you sit at the front?" "Where?" Her voice went thin, and she made herself finish it. "There's a place my mother would have stood, to see me married. Nobody can stand in it. But if you were sitting near it, I think I could look at you when I need to look at someone, if you were willing." Laura Cavalier had raised a son alone, buried a husband, and run a business for 20 years among the pins. She put her arms around Bella and held on, and for a long moment, the lamp had the only dry eye in the room. "Child," she said at last into Bella's hair, "wild horses. That's all I'll say on it, wild horses." And no more was said on it, because no more was needed. Bella woke on her wedding morning to a sound she couldn't place, a rhythmic bite and sigh, coming from beyond the garden. She wrapped her shawl over her nightdress and stepped out into a dawn the color of apricots. There, along the east side of the house, where the morning sun would find them first, Joshua Miller stood in the half-dark, digging. 6 slender saplings lay beside the row of holes with their roots bundled in wet sacking, and their thin branches were hazed with the first red-brown of budding leaves. Cherry trees. "You're not to be seeing me today," he said, without turning around. "It's bad luck. Go back inside." "You're digging in the dark on your wedding morning." "I am. The freight was late. They came in on yesterday's train, all the way from a nursery in Minnesota. A man can't marry a woman he promised cherry trees while her cherry trees sit at a depot." He set the last one in its hole and firmed the earth around it with his boot. "6 of them. One for every pie you threatened me with." Bella came down the steps and stood among the little trees in her shawl. If you had asked her in that moment to trade all 6 for every silver fork in New York, she would have laughed at you. "I have something for you too," she said. "I meant to send it with Hank, but you're here, so." From the pocket of her shawl, she took a folded page and put it in his earth-stained hand. "I've never given anyone a poem before. You'll be the first, and the only, from now on." He unfolded it there between the cherry trees and read it in the growing light, slowly, the way he read anything that mattered. "Plant me no roses that bloom and are done. Give me the tree that stands to the sun, that bears the long winter, the frost and the snow, and sweetens the summer, slow year by slow, for that is the loving. I'll give and I'll take, the kind that the cold of this world cannot break." Joshua read it twice. Then he folded it with the care a man gives a deed to good land and put it in his breast pocket on the left side. "It'll be in this pocket at the church," he said, "so you'll know." He gathered his spade and went, because the sun was coming and the rules are the rules. But at the gate he stopped. "Bella, the line about the frost and the snow." He looked back at her through the young trees. "That's us, isn't it? Both of us." "It's us," she said. He nodded once and walked down toward the barn, and the sun came up over a ranch that had 6 more trees and 1 less lonely man than it had the spring before. All the townsfolk turned up for the wedding, thanks to Laura. The sun shone down on the little church in Maple Hill, basking the wedding-goers in its light. Bella, of course, was radiant, but the two of them together touched the hearts of everyone in the church that day. A wedding is not a rare event. The wedding of 2 people who have walked through fire to find each other is rarer. Most hearts must do their mending alone. When 2 mend together, the mending becomes a work of art. "Doesn't she look beautiful?" Laura whispered to Hank. "Absolutely," Hank whispered back. "But do you know who made that dress? I think I see a loose thread." Hank teased. "Oh, you stop it." She hit him on his leg and he pretended to be hurt. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." The preacher smiled at them. They turned toward each other and Joshua kissed her and hugged her gently. "Will you plant me those trees now, dear husband?" she whispered into his ear. He laughed out loud before the entire congregation. "I will plant you 1,000 trees, Bella Miller," he said. He kissed her again, positive about having been handed the world on a silver platter.